Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see some friends. Nisha ji, I can see you. You are in Bangalore, I'm told.
Hello. I'm in
Hi,
Delhi.
Raja.
Just
Good
want to
to
see
see
you
you again.
tomorrow.
Yeah. Excellent, Rahul. I can see Saroja. I can see 3 श्रमिक भाई आ गए हैं और एक बहन, 2 भाई और एक बहन, बहुत अच्छे। और कौन है यहाँ पर? मंजीत अपनी टीम से नजर आए। विनीत जी, वेलकम, थैंक यू। भारती, वेलकम, thank you. I can see Aditi. Geeta, thank you for joining us from Pune. There are names that I'm not aware of. Dr. Sophie, I can see you. Thank you. Great. Your Zoom is working, which is nice. I don't recognize many names, so forgive me. Abha, welcome. Jyoti, welcome.
Thank you.
We have Raja also, Sandeep.
Yes. Yes, I said hi to him. Yes, hi, Raja.
आपकी कार में आपकी सेफ्टी के लिए सब कुछ है।
हमारी कंपनियों में गाड़ियों के पुर्जे बनते हैं और उन पुर्जों को बनाते हुए हम चोटीले भी होते हैं।
एक तो लेडीज थी, उसकी 2 उंगलियां कटी, एक जेंट्स था, उसकी 1 उंगलियां कटी, एक जेंट्स का तो पूरा यहाँ से ही खत्म है।
कुदरत की अब सारी जिंदगी रोना ही है, इसका ये मानना है।
ईएसआई में इलाज के अलावा भी और कोई बेनिफिट्स है, वो उनको पूरी जानकारियाँ मिलती है
कि आप अपना बेनिफिट किस तरीके से ले सकते हैं और उसके लिए आपको क्या क्या करना होगा, वो आपको तरीका बताते हैं, प्रोसीजर बताते हैं।
2 साल हो गए मेरे को और मेरा ईएसआई से पेंशन आ रहा है।
के पैसे से मैं अपना बिजनेस खड़ा किया और उससे मैं खुद कमा रहा हूँ, 2 लोगों को रोजगार भी दे रहा हूँ।
क्या कि रास्ता मिल गई कि हम कहाँ से कहाँ जाएंगे, क्या करेंगे, किस हिसाब से मिलेंगे, ये सारी जानकारी मिल रही।
आज के दौर में मालिक ऐसे हो गए हैं, इतने लालची हैं कि वो वर्कर की तरफ बिल्कुल सोचते नहीं।
I think the way it's been illustrated is very eye-opening. The reds need to definitely become ambers. The ambers definitely need to green.
Businesses for brands, I have a few very specific expectations. Don't shy away with displaying the right grievances, the right violations happening in the industry.
The same things that would help you improve safety would also likely increase productivity, also likely increase growth.
देश के स्तर पर देखा जाए तो सेफ्टी इश्यूज को एड्रेस किया जाए तो 4% से बढ़ेगा, देश के जीडीपी की वृद्धि हो सकती है।
सेशन के बाद हमको पता चला कि क्या क्या फायदे हैं, हमको अच्छा लगा, इसलिए हम लोग रजिस्टर करिए।
सर जी, मैंने मेरी छुट्टी का पैसा, मेरा पेंशन और मेरा EWF जो अप्लाई किया है ये सेफ इन इंडिया से किया है और मुझे अपने अधिकारों के बारे में पूरा पता है।
वन सेफ्टी इंडिया के लिए लोगों को मैं जोड़ूं कि माँ चलो मेरे साथ, माँ मिलो, वो तुम्हारी मदद करेंगे, जैसे मेरी मदद करी ऐसे आपकी भी करेंगे।
जिस कंडीशन से गुजरा था आज वो वर्कर उसी कंडीशन से गुजर रहे हैं। जब मैं उनको देखता हूँ तो मुझे लगता है कि ये जो मुझे चोट लगी थी ये इनको नहीं लगी, ये मुझे लगी है।
कि वो लालची हो गए, उनको लालच के सामने कुछ दिखाई नहीं देता है, उनको केवल और केवल प्रोडक्शन चाहिए।
अगर मान लीजिए आज अगर पार्ट की क्वालिटी के प्रॉब्लम आ गई तो ब्रांड वो लेवल वो टियर नहीं देखते, फिर वो जिस टियर तक जाना है उस टियर तक उसी मोमेंट पे पहुंच जाते हैं। तो अगर क्वालिटी के लिए सब जगह पहुंच सकते हैं तो सेफ्टी के लिए भी पहुंच सकते हैं, है ना। तो
I think we can start, Sandeep. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today at the Safe in India launch of the 8th edition of Crushed. Safe in India, as you know, started off helping injured workers access their ESIC dues, especially in the auto manufacturing hubs in 2016. Over time, we have opened more offices. We are currently at 6. We have expanded the team and also expanded our assistance to non-injured workers. Unfortunately, our work has only continued to show us that the number of injured workers we meet is just the tip of the iceberg. We end up realizing that much of our manufacturing sector continues to focus on short-term gains over long-term investments in research, training, professionalism, or at times even basic workplace safety and hygiene. So often, for the want of a timely replacement of a 1,500 rupee spring or bolt, a person loses their digits or limbs. At Safe in India, we've been advocating to the top 10 brands that they take responsibility for the entire supply chain, for the work environment that's provided in those factories, for the injuries that happen, given that they already do a lot of the quality and technology adoptions in the lower tiers of their supply chain. We've also been analyzing their OSH-related policies for their supply chains and their submissions in the BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report that they submit to SEBI, and have been pushing for improving the same to benefit the entire ecosystem. We've also begun advocating to workers to make them more aware of what the labor codes have for the workers and what they should be looking for to take care of themselves. In March this year, we held 3 Shramik Sammelans attended by thousands of our worker friends and released a report called Shramik Suraksha, which talked about the issues surrounding ESIC safety and HR, including the need to get something as basic as appointment letter or even the salary slip. Having gotten insights from over 12,000 workers so far that our Pillar 1 team on the ground has provided, we have also begun conducting more research into global benchmarks, which ended with our first paper that conclusively connected work environments with efficiency and productivity, which the Economic Survey 24-25 referred to, and it also showcased some of the case studies and recommendations from that report. That we all want 1.5 billion Indians to thrive and the economy be made robust and strong is a given. But the question always remains, are we using every opportunity to help reach these goals? Are we empowering all our citizens with the best environment in which they can contribute their best? Or are we looking at their vulnerability and their lack of agency and take advantage wherever we can, leading to a downward spiral of a low velocity economy where so many just survive, and global competitiveness is now measured by how well we wield a screwdriver. The new labor codes and rules acknowledge these issues both directly and tangentially, but will they be implemented in word and spirit? Should ease of doing business become ease of being a responsible business? We hope to answer some of these questions and maybe end up raising more questions in the next hour and a half. Siddharth and Dhanraj, who
Saroja, have gone on mute by chance. Saroja, I've gone on mute by chance, just as you started talking about Dhanraj. Okay,
Thank
it's
you.
okay.
Siddharth and Dhanraj, who wrote this report, Crush 2026, will take you through some of the highlights. Then we have a panel of our worker friends who will discuss the importance of working conditions and social security like ESIC in increasing labor productivity, which will be moderated by my colleague Rahul Kohli. That will be followed by an expert panel on From Policy to Practice, importance of implementing the labor code rules in promoting responsible businesses and professionalism, moderated by our co-founder and CEO, Sandeep Sachdeva. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you find it illuminating and will join us in this endeavor to raise Indian manufacturing to its potential. Do also join us on all our social media platforms and help us spread the word as far and wide as we all can. Over to you, Siddharth and Dhanraj.
I'm just sharing the presentation. Could you please enable screen sharing?
While you are setting it up, welcome. I can see Mahindra team here from Mumbai. Welcome.
Yes, Siddharth, I allow.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Is the presentation visible?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, thank you all for joining us for the launch of Crush 2026 report. It is 8th in the edition of the Crushed series. So, I'll talk a bit about Crushed. So, it's an evidence-based report which analyzes the data taken from workers whom we have assisted for ESIC assistance, and in process, we have taken this data. These are the injured workers who faced an injury while working in the supply chains for supply chain factories for the automobile brands in Haryana and Maharashtra. In 2025, we opened another worker assistance center in Tamil Nadu, and in the report, we have put some qualitative stories of those workers, and so the purpose of this report has always been to put out credible data for advocating for better working conditions. Before we get into the data, we want to take a moment to acknowledge who the report is actually about. As I mentioned, we take data from workers to come up with this report. So I want to highlight some of the cases or some of the worker stories. So you can see on the image on the screen, there are 4 worker profiles. So I'll start from the left. On the left is Mr. Dilip Yadav. He got injured at the age of 28. He's from Madhya Pradesh. He got injured because the machine had a loose bolt, and this resulted in the loss of his index finger. Moreover, after the injury, he was taken to a private hospital instead of being taken to ESIC hospital, which should be done for the initial treatment. Then the second image from the left is of Miss Ram Kishori. She's from Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. So she got injured while working on a Sunday. Her employer insisted her to sit on a power press machine, which was dysfunctional for past several days. She insisted, but the employer, the supervisor, they forced her to sit on the machine. Within minutes of operating the machine, her hand got stuck in the machine for 25 minutes before they could disassemble the machine and take her hand out. And this resulted in her losing her entire palm. Then the third story is of Mr. Rajini from Tamil Nadu. So this is one of the case we got to know about through our worker assistance center in Tamil Nadu. So his supervisor directed him to operate a power press machine due to labor shortage. He actually wasn't an operator, but a helper. But the labor shortage due to labor shortage, the supervisor asked him to sit on the machine, and due to a double stroke, he lost his fingers. Then the fourth case is of Mr. Jitendra Singh. He got injured in 2024. He lost his entire palm while working on a malfunctioned machine. His employer admitted him to a private hospital, did not file his accident reports for 13 long months. It took 5 ESIC notices, 2 notices from LWF and Safe in India pursuing the district Industrial Safety and Health Department to send a notice to the employer, which resulted in filing of accident report after 13 months. So these 4 workers are among thousands who have come to Safe in India over the years. Like these, majority of the workers are migrants belonging to different states, with Bihar and Uttar Pradesh being proportionately the highest in terms of contributing to these injured workers. So year after year, workers from the auto sector, supplier factories continue to come after being injured. So this is a sustained pattern. There's not a sudden spike, but a continuous, persistent number of workers coming to us. The increase in the number of workers has another reason. In addition to the injury, Safe in India has been, so in 2025, we opened our center in Tamil Nadu and one more center in Pune. So this is one reason for greater number of injured workers coming to us and being documented in our records. So when we look closely at these injuries, the data, it has a specific pattern. More than 2/3 of the injured workers assisted by Safe in India have lost their fingers. So there's a continued trend of approximately 65% of injuries being crush injury, where the worker loses at least one finger. This is what Safe in India's data shows. When we look at what the officially recorded data says, so an important gap emerges. So when we place the 3 data sources side by side, the DG Fastly data, which data, which is based on the industrial accidents happening in non-fatal industrial accidents happening in Haryana. So this is represented by the green line at the bottom. Then the other data is the workers who are assisted by Safe in India. That is the line in crimson color, and the data based on the benefit disbursement benefit by ESIC, that is in the peach color. So 2 points emerge here. One, the data highlighted, the data published and reported by DG Fastly is a fraction of the number of workers which have been assisted by Safe in India, and even the ESIC disbursement. And this is not a one-year trend, but continue to be at least in this graph since 2013. Another important thing to highlight is that DG Fastly has not published data beyond 2023, even in 2026. So in terms of publishing of data, they are 3 years behind. In this context, we would want to look at the employment condition and the lack of professionalism that we have witnessed through our data in the supply chain factories. These slides bring that forward. The first point is, so the graph on the left, it highlights that in 2025, only 5% of workers that were assisted by Safe in India had received an appointment letter. It is important to highlight this because the new labor code now rule explicitly mandates appointment letter, and that too in a prescribed formats with specifically mentioning the indicators that should be there. The second graph in the middle is an indicator of working hours. A significant proportion of workers are working more than 60 hours a week. 76% of the workers assisted by Safe in India in 2024 had worked for more than 60 hours a week. This number was 72% in 2025. The third graph on the left is an indicator of training. A large proportion of workers receive no safety training before they are made to sit on the machines to operate. 37% of the workers got to learn to operate machine only while they were working on it. 33% were briefly and verbally oriented by the supervisor with no practical method followed. So these indicators highlight the lack of professionalism. I now hand over to Dhanraj to speak about the survey that was based to understand the safety mechanism and other OSH parameters in different automobile clusters of India. Dhanraj, over to you.
Thanks, Siddharth. So one of the additions, thanks Siddharth, as Siddharth mentioned, one of the additions of this edition of Crushed is a survey that we conducted as part of an index, of a safety index. We did this in 4 states, the 4 major auto cluster states, which are Haryana, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, and the brands which are part of those clusters highlighted in the slide right now. So what we have done is at least 120 workers were interviewed. This includes injured, non-injured workers both, and at least 120 workers per state were interviewed as part of this survey for the index, which included 30+ questions. And the questions included multiple areas, including direct questions on safety, working hours, inspections, training, inspections audited by both government as well as companies, by brands, by their own direct buyers. So those questions and what we see is, next slide, Siddharth. So what we see, this is just one of the indicators that we have measured the states across, which is direct question on safety mechanisms being present. This is just for Power Press Nation. We have done for others that we have interviewed also. What we see is that Haryana and Maharashtra do worse than Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Doesn't mean Tamil Nadu and Karnataka do not have issues. They do have issues on, for example, on the question of working hours. All states do bad, but comparatively, these 2 states in the south do slightly better, which means some of the steps that are being implemented there can be adopted across the country. So that's the broad outline. Chapter 6 of the report highlights all the indicators that we have measured in terms of safety. And next slide. So getting back to the data from the 11,000 plus workers we have assisted. So this is back to Maharashtra and Haryana and Maharashtra. And what we observe here is that in these states, most of the injured workers were from the supply chain of the 6 brands, 3+3, which are majorly present in these 2 states. In the Faridabad, Gurgaon, Manesar clusters of Haryana, where we have been working for 10+ years, 10th year, 9+ year, 10 years, most of the workers were from the supply chains of Maruti, Honda, and Hero. And in Maharashtra, they're from the supply chains of Mahindra, Tata, and Bajaj, as is visible. We have also supported some workers from the supply chain of other brands, but since we have just started in Tamil Nadu and we had to start in Karnataka and Gujarat, we do not have a lot of cases from those locations, as is seen in the graph. And what we see is that the numbers are broadly aligned to market shares. So it's a multi-brand, multi-state issue. Yes. Next slide. So one positive is that in Haryana, where we have been working for the 10th year now, what we have seen in the last 3 years, and we had mentioned it in the previous releases, that once we have 3 years of a decrease, we will call it a trend. There's an indicative trend slightly downwards in the supply chains of Maruti, Honda, and Hero, which have a lot of presence in Haryana, where we have been working for the 10th year right now. So that is a positive that we would like to highlight. Compared to that, next slide, in Haryana, in Maharashtra, next slide, where we've been around only since 2022, we do not have a similar trend. We have found more workers. This is also because we have opened a new center and we are new and we are finding old cases. So it's still there. One exception is, of course, Bajaj, where we have not found a lot of cases from the Bajaj supply chain. This also fits into the Safety Niti findings. Safety Niti is our other report, which will be released later this year, 6th edition. But in the previous editions, 5th, 4th, what you found is that Bajaj was ranked top in terms of policies and processes for their own factories and their supply chain. So that kind of aligns with what we see there. We'd also like to highlight that we have had excellent discussions with brands, especially Mahindra, whose representative is there as part of this meeting. In the last 4 months, we have had excellent discussions. We are hoping that we'll have concrete actions for in the future. Mahindra, as well as other top 9 brands, and also suppliers in the future, hopefully. So that's the larger picture on these. Back to Siddharth.
Thank you, Dhanraj. So moving beyond the numbers, there are 2 indicators in this report which highlight some improvement on the ground. The first is issuance of ESIC e-Pehchan card. So we are pleased to highlight that Haryana has shown an improved, steady improvement in the proportion of workers receiving their ESIC e-Pehchan card before the accident. So overall, around 60% of the workers, 60-65% of the workers still receive their ESIC card only after they get injured. Despite the fact that they are registered under ESIC, the employer does the handover of the ESIC card only after they get injured. So in Haryana, there has been an improvement in this figure. So this matches with the advocacy efforts that Safe in India has been doing for the number of years it has been operating in Haryana. In contrast, in Maharashtra, where Safe in India began its operations and advocacy in 2024, the trends as of now do not look improving, and they ask for further advocacy and other intervention-based efforts. The second indicator where we can see some progress is worker getting the first treatment at ESIC facilities. Injured workers in factories, they're entitled to their first treatment at the ESIC hospitals because these facilities, they provide treatment and appropriate care at no cost to them. So that is why it's important. Maharashtra has actually, cumulatively, overall, Maharashtra has performed better than Haryana, with being roughly between 64-65% of workers were first taken to ESIC hospital for treatment. Though Haryana cumulatively is at 58% in 2025, and which is lower than Maharashtra. However, the Haryana has been showing a positive trend with constant increase in numbers from 46% in 2019 to 58% in 2025. So with this, we would want to highlight our efforts and advocacy-based efforts which are ongoing, and some of the efforts that we are and we would continue to pursue. First, the strong enforcement by brands and government, which means accelerating actions with brands, pushing and advocating for change in policy for their own operations and supply chain, and implementation in the supply chain, which reflects in our Safety Niti report analysis, about which Dhanraj spoke very briefly. The second is the joint ISH Maruti Hero Honda Safe in India platform, which holds ISH means the Department of Industrial Safety and Health in Gurgaon, which holds quarterly meeting. And during our last meeting, ISH had instructed the three Haryana-based brands to re-audit 10 of their tier 2 suppliers who were audited in 2024. In addition to that, we are trying to hold a joint platform meeting with industry stakeholders through Ministry of Labor and Employment. Then ensuring accurate data is collected and reported. It starts with the fact that DG Fastly must reflect the ground reality. Without accurate number, enforcement cannot be proportionate. SII has suggested to Ministry of Labor and Employment to use the ESIC data as a centralized data repository and for identification of industry injury hotspots. Then industry-wide sharing of best practices, which is taking forward the coverage of linkage between better working condition and labor productivity, which was published and highlighted in Economic Survey 2024-25. How we are doing it? Through working with different industry stakeholders, starting from brand to industry associations like ACMA for creation of business case for safety. Then awareness and empowerment of workers and different stakeholders. How we are doing it? So the examples of this are the training of 10,000 workers on ESIC and safety. Then the second point is the launching of Shramik Suraksha report and conducting 3 Shramik Sammelans, about which Saroja ma'am mentioned in the very beginning, for the empowerment of workers on ESIC and safety related issue in alignment with the labor codes, now called rules after notification. So we present these findings in the hope that they inform constructive action across the industry ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth and Dhanraj. Over to you, Rahul.
शुक्रिया संदीप. मेरी आवाज ठीक आ रही है ना?
फर्स्ट क्लास.
थैंक यू. जगदीप जी, आप वहाँ म्यूट अनम्यूट करना पड़ेगा आपको पूना में.
यस श्योर सर, अनम्यूट किया है.
शुक्रिया शुक्रिया. प्रणाम सबको. हमारे काफ़ी साथी इस प्रोग्राम में आए हैं हमारे साथ, उन सबको मेरा प्रणाम। और ख़ास करके हमारे 3 श्रमिक साथी जो पूना में हमारे ऑफिस में बैठे हैं, श्रीमती जयश्री जी, श्री राम सिंह जी और श्री पिंटू जी। मैं
Thank you,
आपका
sir.
बहुत आभारी हूँ कि आप तीनों ने हमारे ऑफिस आए ताकि आप हमारे साथ इस प्रोग्राम में शामिल हों। मैं आप लोगों से चंद सवाल तो नहीं है, पर चंद स्टेटमेंट बोलूंगा, बात करेंगे, और आप 3 अपने दृष्टिकोण, अपना अपना विचार, आप क्या सोचते हैं इसके बारे में, आप प्लीज हमें और हमारे जो साथी आए हुए हैं इस प्रोग्राम में उनको बताइए। इसके पहले जैसे आपने देखा, सिद्धार्थ ने और धनराज ने और सरोजा ने रिपोर्ट के बारे में बताया, रिपोर्ट में क्या क्या है बताया, रिपोर्ट में किस तरीके के डेटा आप सबके साथ शेयर किया। तो वो आपको तो पता ही है क्योंकि आप हमारे साथ काफ़ी समय से जुड़े हैं। हालांकि जयश्री जी हमारे साथ 6 या 8 महीने से ही आई हुई हैं। तो सबसे पहले जयश्री जी, मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगा, कल तो नहीं, शायद कल दफ्तर नहीं जाए, ऑफिस नहीं जाएंगे, फैक्ट्री नहीं जाएंगे, शायद कल जाएंगे आप?
कल क्या?
कल आप फैक्ट्री जाएंगे?
हाँ, जाएंगे ना कल।
तो हमारे मित्रों को बताइए कि आप कल जाएंगे तो आपका कल दिन कैसा होगा, आपका एक फैक्ट्री में आम दिन कैसा होता है,
अच्छा हुआ ऐसा बोलेंगे।
क्या करते हैं आप? जैसे फैक्ट्री में जाते हैं, कैसे दिन शुरू करते हैं, क्या करते हैं उसके बाद?
पहले जाते हैं, वो साफ सफाई करते हैं, बाद में वो जॉब लेते हैं, बाद में काम शुरू करते हैं।
तो आप जिस पहले दिन जब गए थे फैक्ट्री में तो आपका क्या अनुभव था?
पहले दिन गए थे, वो दिन अनुभव नहीं था मेरे को ज्यादा। मैं गई थी पहले दिन, वो जॉब था, वो मालिक ने बोला वो जॉब लेके आओ, वो काम करके बैठो। मैंने काम करके बैठा।
आपको कोई ट्रेनिंग दी उन्होंने, कुछ बताया कंपनी के बारे में, कुछ किया कि सीधा आपको काम पे लगा दिया?
कुछ भी नहीं बताया सर मेरे को।
ठीक है, उस विषय पे हम बाद में आते हैं। राम सिंह जी, आप बताइए, आपका एक दिन फैक्ट्री में कैसे, क्या करते हैं, कैसे करते हैं, कोई भी आपका अनुभव हो जो इसमें।
सुबह जाते ही सबसे पहले मैं मेंटेनेंस का देखता हूँ सर, मशीन मेंटेनेंस है या नहीं है, उसके नट बोल्ट सब चेक करता हूँ, ऑयलिंग करता हूँ, उसके बाद में मशीन चालू करके देखता हूँ, उसके बाद ही आगे का काम चालू करता हूँ। सबसे पहले मेरी सेफ्टी के लिए पहले मशीन चेक किए बगैर मैं पेंडल हैंडल मारता नहीं, ना हाथ से दबाता हूँ।
तो ये क्या सब आपके जो साथी हैं सब ऐसे ही दिन अपना शुरू करते हैं?
हाँ, अधिकतर लोग हैं वो पहले सेफ्टी देख करके ही मशीन को ऑन करते हैं।
और जब आपने काम शुरू किया करीबन 25 साल पहले, जहां तक मुझे याद है, तो उस दिन भी आपका जो पहला दिन था वो ऐसा ही था?
नहीं, फर्स्ट दिन के अंदर तो जब मैं स्टार्टिंग में गया था उसमें ऐसी विशेष कोई जानकारी नहीं थी। स्टार्टिंग में मैं हेल्परी का काम करता रहा, उसके बाद में मशीन चलाना सीखा और सुपरवाइजर की देखरेख में मशीन चलाना सीखा मैंने।
तो आपको कोई ट्रेनिंग मिली उस वक्त जब आप फैक्ट्री में गए?
सुपरवाइजर के द्वारा मैंने को ट्रेनिंग दिया गया कि ऐसे ये पहले आते ही स्टार्टिंग में ये चेक करने का ऑयलिंग है कि नहीं है, उसके बैक लग रहे हैं नहीं लग रहे हैं, सब चेक करके ही मशीन हमेशा चालू करने। तब से मैं ये नींव लगा रखा हूँ। स्टार्टिंग में जाते ही सबसे पहले मशीन की चेकिंग करता हूँ, नट बोल्ट कोई लूज है कि नहीं है, सेफ्टी के लिए पहले देखता हूँ।
इस विषय में आपसे बाद में एक और सवाल पूछूंगा आप सब तीनों से। पिंटू जी, आपका क्या अनुभव है इसमें, जब आप फैक्ट्री जाएंगे, पहले कल जाएंगे या सोमवार को जाएंगे या पहली बार जब आप गए फैक्ट्री में?
सर मैं अभी तो छुट्टी पे, कल तो मैं काम पे नहीं जाऊंगा, लेकिन मेरा अनुभव है, मैं कंपनी में जाएगा तो पूरा मशीन देखना मेरा काम है। पूरा मशीन पहले चेक कर देता है, किसका बेल्ट लूज है, किसका बोल्ट लूज है, क्या कौन सा पैडल का स्प्रिंग टूटा है या कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, पहला सेफ्टी देखता है। उसके बाद में सभी ऑपरेटर को मशीन पे बैठाता है, मैं खुद बैठता है,
तभी मैं काम चालू कर देता है।
ठीक। तो आप तीनों का मतलब ये बहुत अच्छी बात है कि आप तीन अपने दिन शुरू करने के पहले सारा अपना मशीन का चेक करते हैं, सेफ्टी का। तो जयश्री जी, जब कोई नया श्रमिक आता है आपकी फैक्ट्री में या किसी भी फैक्ट्री में, तो आपके अनुभव में उनको ट्रेनिंग का जो होना चाहिए उससे फायदा क्या होता है?
फायदा तो बहुत होता है सर,
बताएंगी?
फायदा होता है।
किस तरीके से फायदा होता है आप बता दीजिए।
हम अच्छे से काम करेंगे, अच्छे से रहेंगे तो फायदा हो जाएगा। हम कुछ गलत चीज को गलत हाथ लगाएंगे तो कोई भी एक्सीडेंट होता है।
तो आपकी वजह आपके कहने में एक्सीडेंट तब होते हैं जब कोई गलत काम किया जाए या कोई ट्रेनिंग ना हो या श्रमिक को पता ना हो।
नहीं, वो पहले से भी देखना चाहिए अच्छा है क्या, नहीं किसी से पूछना है अच्छा है क्या, इसको हाथ लगाओ क्या, काम काम करो क्या, ऐसा होता है। जब हम ऐसे पूछेंगे, वो लोग बोलेंगे ये अच्छा है, उसको कुछ भी नहीं होता है, काम करो, तो हम करेंगे।
तो उसके बाद क्या होता क्या है आमतौर पे अगर ऐसी कोई स्थिति हो?
अच्छा रहेगा तो अच्छा ही होगा।
ठीक है, राम सिंह जी, आपके अनुभव में?
सर तो सर कुछ अधिकतर तो जानकारी होनी जरूरी है। अगर जानकारी नहीं है, उस आदमी को अगर मशीन पे बिठाया गया तो एक्सीडेंट ज्यादा होने का चांसेस रहता है। हमारी कंपनी में ऐसे कई वर्कर है जो ऑपरेटर नहीं आने के कारण हेल्पर को भी बिठा करके चलाया जाता है और वो हेल्पर को कोई जानकारी नहीं रहती है। इसलिए जानकारी जरूरी है। ऑपरेटर के अलावा मशीन चलाना गलत है। मालिक अपने फायदे के लिए कुछ भी कराते हैं, तो ऑपरेटर नहीं है 450 वाले हेल्पर को बिठा दो, अपना काम तो निकलेगा। वो नहीं होना चाहिए एक तो सेफ्टी के लिए।
तो नए वर्कर जब आते हैं उनको आपके हिसाब से किस एरिया में ट्रेनिंग देनी चाहिए?
वो सबसे पहले नया वर्कर आया तो जो मेन सुपरवाइजर रहता है उसकी जवाबदारी रहती है सर, कभी इसको पूरा ट्रेंड किया जाए, उसके बाद ही उसको मशीन पे बिठाया जाए। अगर ऑपरेटर है तो भी उसको पहले चेकिंग, डाई लगाना, करना, स्टॉक चेक करना, इसको आता है या नहीं आता है, उसकी जानकारी उसके पास है कि नहीं है। कई क्या करते हैं, हाँ साहब मैं ऑपरेटर हूँ, और फल लेते हैं। अब बाद में वो एक्सीडेंट होता है तब पता चलता है कि ये तो हेल्पर था। तो उसको पहले सुपरवाइजर की जवाबदारी है, मालिक की भी जवाबदारी है कि उसकी पहले ट्रेनिंग ले, उसके बाद ही उसका अपार्टमेंट करे कि भाई ये मशीन चलाने के लायक है यार। ऐसे
तो
जानकारी
आपके आपके हिसाब में, आप इस फैक्ट्री में काफी साल से काम कर रहे थे आपने मुझे बताया है,
हाँ
तो क्यों, मतलब ट्रेनिंग नहीं देने से कितने हादसे होते हैं इंजरी के? फिर भी
ट्रेनिंग नहीं होने के कारण कम से कम 60% हादसे ट्रेनिंग नहीं होने के कारण ही होता है, क्योंकि मशीन की जानकारी नहीं रहती। अभी कई लेडीज हमने कई कंपनी में देखा है, लेडीज को आज भर्ती किया, दूसरे दिन उसको मशीन पे बिठा दिया जाता है। अब उस लेडीज को यही पता नहीं है कि वो बटन किधर से दबाने का, किधर ऑफ करने का। खाली वो सुपरवाइजर आएगा, बोलेगा मैडम ये हरा बटन दबा दो, चालू हो जाएगी। अब वापस बंद करना है तो वापस पूछती है सर क्या करें, इसका किधर से बंद होगी। अब ऐसे लेडीज को आप मशीन पे बिठाओगे तो सेफ्टी किधर है, वो अपना हाथ घुमा के ही बैठेगी।
तो आप मुझे बताइए, जैसे पहले हमारे शुरू में वीडियो में एक अजीत रानडे हैं इकोनॉमिस्ट, उन्होंने कहा कि अगर सेफ्टी का पालन ठीक तरह हो तो देश की प्रोडक्टिविटी में बहुत बढ़ोतरी होगी।
सबसे पहले तो सर हर मशीन के ऊपर सेंसर होना चाहिए। सेंसर होने के कारण सेफ्टी ज्यादा हो जाएगी, क्योंकि वर्कर का हाथ जाने का 100% चांस कम हो जाएगा, क्योंकि सेंसर आदमी की लंबाई से लगता है। तो वो जब तक सेंसर उसके सामने रहेगा, वो अगर आगे चला गया तो वो मशीन जगह पे बंद हो जाएगी सर। सेंसर की वजह से 90% हादसे कम हो जाएगी। मगर मालिक अपना फायदा सोचने के कारण सेंसर लगाते नहीं, क्योंकि सेंसर में स्पीड कम रहती है और मटेरियल कम निकलता है, उस वजह से वो सेंसर नहीं लगाते। कभी ये सेंसर लगा दिया तो ये आराम से मारेंगे, ये लंबा खड़ा रहेगा, ऑपरेटर पास में चला गया तो मशीन बंद पड़ेगी बार बार। इस वजह से वो सेंसर का उपयोग कम करना चाहते हैं, डायरेक्ट चलाते हैं, इससे वर्कर की हानि हो रही है ज्यादातर।
पर आप एक बात पित्तू जी से भी पूछूंगा, पर राम सिंह जी एक बात बताइए मुझे, जब जो भी आपके इन कंपनियों के मालिक हैं वो भी देख रहे हैं कि जब एक्सीडेंट होता है तो मशीन बंद पड़ी होती है, प्रोडक्शन बंद कम हो जाता है, तो उनको नहीं लगता कि अगर ये सेफ्टी के सारे जो चीजें हैं अनिवार्य हैं वो करेंगे तो उनका उत्पादन बढ़ेगा?
उनके दिमाग में ये नहीं रहता सर, वो उनके दिमाग में क्या रहता है कि इसका एक्सीडेंट हो गया दूसरा मिलेगा। ज्यादातर भावना ये रहती है वर्कर की, क्या ये गया धन दो, ये तो 2-3 महीना आने वाला नहीं है, दूसरा अपार्टमेंट करेंगे, अपना काम तो चलता रहेगा। वो वर्कर की सेफ्टी नहीं देखते सर, खाली अपने काम का देखते हैं, भाई हमारा काम नहीं रुकना चाहिए, चाहे हेल्पर को बिठा करके मशीन चलाओ मगर चलाओ।
पर एक वर्कर है, अगर समझ लो जैसे आप वहाँ काम कर रहे हैं, एक वर्कर को की इंजरी हो गई क्योंकि सेफ्टी का इक्विपमेंट ठीक नहीं था, अब जो दूसरा वर्कर आएगा उसके वहाँ काम करने, उसको भी तो पता है ना कि
उस आदमी को जानकारी नहीं दी जाती है कि ये मशीन से बार बार एक्सीडेंट हो रहा है। वो नया आदमी है, बेचारा आएगा लगाएगा, कपलिंग आ गई तो हो गया काम से, ये प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है। आपसे वर्कर सुपरवाइजर की भी जवाबदारी रहती है कि उसको बताना चाहिए, मगर वो सुपरवाइजर भी उसको बताता नहीं काम के लिए, कि इसको अगर बता दिया कि ऐसे इस मशीन पे 2-3 हादसे हो रखे हैं तो ये साला चलाएगा नहीं।
वैसे भी नहीं बताते, फिर बोलते हैं कि तुम काम करना है तो इस मशीन पे करो वरना घर पे जाओ, ऐसे बोलते।
पिंटू जी आपका क्या अनुभव है? आपके हिसाब में ये ट्रेनिंग नए वर्कर या पुराने वर्कर सबकी रेगुलरली होनी चाहिए? आपका क्या अनुभव है आपकी फैक्ट्री में?
मेरा अनुभव ऐसा है कि अगर तो हेल्पर को बिठाते हैं तो मैं पहले उनको बोल देता है, जो मेरे ऊपर जो सुपरवाइजर है उसको मैं डायरेक्टली बोल देता है, भाई मैं हेल्पर को बिठाता है मान्य है, लेकिन उसका ये निकाला है क्या, निकाला रहेगा तो मैं उसको मशीन पे बिठाएगा। वो उनका प्रोडक्शन के लिए वो कुछ सोचते नहीं, कुछ नहीं, नहीं अपना प्रोडक्शन निकलना होता है, थोड़ा उसको आराम से मारने को बोलो ठीक है। लेकिन मैं पहली बात जब भी किसको भी बिठाना है मशीन पे, उसको मैं पहले ऑफिस में जाके उसको बोलता है कि भाई उसका ऐसा ही निकला है क्या, कार्ड निकला है क्या, अगर कल कुछ हो जाएगा तो उसका जिम्मेदार कौन, करके मैं चाहे तो मैं किसी को बिठाता ही नहीं मशीन पे, चाहे वो मशीन बंद रहे चलेगा। इसके लिए साहब का सुपरवाइजर का मेरा ज्यादा तो जमता ही नहीं। मैं लेबर के बारे में ऐसा बात करेगा तो उनका मेरा कभी जमता ही नहीं।
आपने एक बहुत अच्छी बात छेड़ी पिंटू जी, जब आपकी फैक्ट्री में, आप इस फैक्ट्री में कम से कम 10 या 12 साल से हैं?
मैं 16 साल से।
16 साल से, हाँ सॉरी। तो आपके इस 16 साल में काफी वर्कर्स को इंजरी हुई होगी?
हाँ बहुत सारे
तो इस वक्त कितनी बार आपके जानकारी में ईएसआईसी का सबसे इमीडिएट रजिस्टर हुआ, केस हुआ, एक्सीडेंट रिपोर्ट हुआ, उनको ईएसआईसी अस्पताल में लेके गए, कितनी बार हुआ होगा?
मेरे अंदर से 22-23 बार हो गए, मैं खुद लेके गए हॉस्पिटल।
तो सबके पास ईएसआईसी कार्ड है?
हाँ, मैं जब भी ईएसआईसी कार्ड जिसका बना है उसको ही मशीन पे बिठाता था, आज तक का मेरा रिकॉर्ड ही है।
पर बाकी ऐसे वर्कर होंगे जो आपके अंडर काम नहीं करते?
नहीं, मैं भी कामगार ही है, मैं सीनियर ऑपरेटर था तो सब लाइन मैं देखता था। इसकी वजह से मैं अगर कौन नया वर्कर आया कि उसका एसआईसी है या नहीं, उसका पहले जानकारी करने का, तभी उसको मशीन पे बैठाने का।
16 साल पहले जब आप आए तब क्या स्थिति थी?
मेरा 16 साल पहले मैं वही कंपनी में हेल्पर की किया,
वही कंपनी से काम सीखा, वही कंपनी से मैं ऑपरेटर बना और उधर ही अभी भी काम किया।
जब आप आए आपको किसी ने बताया ईएसआईसी के बारे में?
मेरा 10 साल पहले, नहीं 15 साल पहले मेरा एक एक्सीडेंट हो गया था, मेरा उंगली गया था। तो भी साहब ने मेरे को प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल में एडमिट करके बाद में उसने तुरंत ईएसआई कार्ड निकाल के दिया। इससे पहले मेरा ईएसआई कार्ड नहीं था, तभी से मेरे को जानकारी हो गया कि बाबा एसआईसी का क्या फायदा है। और एसआईसी में मेरे को तभी 15 साल पहले पेंसिल बैठ गया था। उसके बाद अभी 3 साल हो गया, तभी एक्सीडेंट हो गया, वो मशीन का ब्रैकेट ही टूट के तभी दूसरा पेंसिल बना था।
जयश्री जी, आपके अनुभव में ईएसआईसी के बारे में, ईएसआईसी जब जाते हैं वहाँ वर्कर, वहाँ का जो कार्रवाई है, लिखा पढ़ी है, ये वर्कर के लिए फायदा है या बहुत मुश्किल होता है? क्या है आपका अनुभव इसमें?
फायदा होता है इससे। मेरे को तो फायदा हुआ। मैं पहले मेरे को भी पहला मेरा भी वहां में इलाज किया है पुणे में, उधर से घर पे लाया हूँ। वो बोले तुम गाँव जाओ। मैं गाँव से आई, सरपति की बार बार इधर मोहन नगर में भेजने को बोला। मैं बोले पैसा नहीं, छुट्टी का पैसा नहीं मिल रहा है, क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है? वो लोग बोले नहीं मिलेगा। तभी मेरे को एक सर उधर हॉस्पिटल में मिले, उन्होंने बोला हमारे पास आ जाओ, हम बताएंगे कैसा नहीं मिलेगा। उनके पास हम गए ना, तब से हमारा पैसा आ गया, छुट्टी का सब पैसा आ गया। और जब भी कोई मेरी जरूरत रहेगी तो मैं उनके ही पास जाती, सर के पास।
तो बाकी जो आपके साथी हैं वहां फैक्ट्री में, उनका क्या अनुभव होगा ईएसआईसी के साथ?
वो ऐसा इसके साथ मेरे साथ अनुभव उनको मालूम हुआ है कि फुकट होता है, सभी इलाज मिलता है बच्चों के लिए, अपने आदमी के लिए, फैमिली के लिए, सब सही है। तो इसलिए हमारे कंपनी में हमारे जैसे वो लेडीज काम करते हैं, वही भी मांग रही है उसको, सुपरवाइजर को ऐसा कार्ड, हमारा भी इलाज हो जाएगा फ्री में। तो वो लोग बोलते हैं नहीं, उनको अभी नहीं देते, इसलिए सब लोग बोलते हैं ऐसा ही चाहिए मेरे कि ऐसा कैसा फायदा होगा।
चलो, राम सिंह जी, आपका अनुभव क्या है इसमें?
सबसे पहले तो सर, अगर कोई स्टार्टिंग होते ही ईएसआई कार्ड मिलना जरूरी है, क्योंकि एक्सीडेंट का कोई भरोसा नहीं, कभी भी हो सकता है। चाहे हेल्पर हो, चाहे ऑपरेटर हो, कोई भी हो, उसका ईएसआई फर्स्ट दिन जब ज्वाइनिंग होता है, उसका ईएसआई कार्ड पहले दिन ही मिलना जरूरी है।
तो आपकी फैक्ट्री में अब सबको बन रहा है?
मिलने के बाद वर्कर की ये जवाबदारी है उसको तुरंत डॉक्टर के पास नोंद कराए। जब तक नोंद नहीं होगा तब तक उस पर कोई प्रक्रिया होने वाली नहीं। मेरी सोच जब तक रहती है, मैं हर वर्कर से जहाँ भी मिलता हूँ उससे पहला पर्सन मेरा यही रहता है, भाई तेरा ईएसआई कार्ड बना हुआ है कि नहीं है। मेरे पास हेल्पर भी काम करता है, तो पहले उसको पूछता हूँ, भाई तेरा कार्ड चालू है या नहीं है, कार्ड बना हुआ है कि नहीं है। तो वो बोलता है नहीं भाई, मेरा पैसा तो कटता है मगर कार्ड नहीं बना। मैं उनको यही बोलता हूँ भाई तुम कॉन्ट्रैक्टर से बात करके पहले कार्ड बना के ले, क्योंकि मेरे पास काम करेगा, एक्सीडेंट हुआ तो कल मालिक कुछ देने वाला नहीं है, बाद में प्रॉब्लम तेरे को आने वाली है, मेरे को नहीं। इसलिए मैं सबसे पहले हर वर्कर को यही प्रोत्साहन देता हूँ, भाई आप पहले अपना ईएसआई कार्ड चालू करके ले। इसके लिए
मुझे एक बात, राम सिंह जी, एक बात बताइए कि कॉन्ट्रैक्टर क्यों नहीं तुरंत ईएसआईसी कार्ड बनवाते हर एक वर्कर का?
वो मेन कारण ये है साहब, उनको इधर उधर सब करना पड़ता है, इस वजह से वो ज्यादातर तो 95% ऐसे कॉन्ट्रैक्टर है जो एक्सीडेंट के बाद उसको कार्ड पकड़ाते हैं, और वो भी बैक डेट में दिखा करके उसका 2 साल पहले ये कार्ड चालू था। वो खाली उसका सैलरी का पैसा, छुट्टी का पैसा नहीं अटके, उस वजह से उन्होंने बैक डेट मार के कार्ड दिखाते हैं। ना कि वो 2-2 साल, मेरे कंपनी में अभी भी ऐसे वर्कर है जिनको 2-2 साल हो गए मगर आज तक उनके पास कार्ड नहीं है। मैं
तो जो कंपनी का मालिक है, वो ठेकेदार को नहीं बोलता कि ये कार्ड बनवाइए?
वो मेन जवाबदारी एचआर की रहती है सर। एचआर ज्यादातर कंपनी वाले ध्यान नहीं देते। उनको खाली काम से मतलब रहता है। HR मीटिंग लेता है, कभी ESI कार्ड के बारे में कभी भी जिंदगी में बोलते नहीं कि भाई आपका ESI कार्ड बना हुआ है कि नहीं है, किसी के लगेगी तो ये सेफ्टी होगी। जबकि ESI कार्ड रहने से कंपनी मालिक को बहुत फायदा होता है, मगर वो ध्यान नहीं देते, क्योंकि ये फर्स्ट एक्सीडेंट होते ही मालिक, कंपनी का मालिक दूसरी जगह प्राइवेट में भेजता है उस आदमी को, वो पैसा बच जाएगा। मगर इसकी ओर HR डिपार्टमेंट मेन ध्यान देना चाहिए कि भाई ये कार्ड हर वर्कर को होना चाहिए। कॉन्ट्रैक्टर को पाबंद करे कि भाई इसका ज्वाइनिंग किया, इसका HR पहले ESI कार्ड 2 दिन के अंदर इसके हाथ में होना चाहिए, तो ही उस वर्कर को ज्वाइनिंग कराया जाए कंपनी के अंदर। सबसे बड़ी लापरवाही कॉन्ट्रैक्टर लोगों की रहती है।
जयश्री जी, आप बताइए मुझे, अगर आप अपने मैनेजमेंट के पास, आपका मैनेजमेंट आपको पूछे कि आपके जिस काम करने का जो एनवायरनमेंट है जहां आप काम कर रही हैं, उसमें एक तब्दीली हो, एक इंप्रूवमेंट हो, एक, तो आप उनको क्या बताएंगी?
सर क्या बोले, फिर से बोलो।
जहां आप काम कर रही हैं वहां का जो इन्वायरमेंट है, जैसे पानी है, हवा है, गंदगी है, आपकी सुविधा के लिए बैठने की जगह है कि नहीं है, तो अगर कुछ अच्छा करना हो तो एक चीज बताइए जो उनको बदलनी चाहिए आज। नहीं, मैं समझा नहीं पाया।
मैं समझा तो सर,
आप बल्ला नहीं
मराठी करते
बोला ना, मराठीमध्ये बोला.
बदलायला हवंय, चांगलं
मला मराठी जगदीप बता दे.
आय विल ट्राय अजून.
हा.
मॅडम साहेब काय विचारतायत की जर आपल्याला काय सुधारसाठी काय विचार सांगायचा असेल आपल्या व्यवस्थापनला, तर आपण एक सुधार काय सांगणार?
थँक्यू.
त्यांना सांगणार की बाबा साफसफाई करून घ्या आणि चांगलं व्यवस्थित ठेवा, आज सांग.
बर,
राम सिंह जी आप बोलिए.
मैं तो सबसे पहले उनको यही बोलूंगा, सबसे पहले तो वाटर फिल्टर लगाया जाए। पानी, सबसे बड़ी कंपनी के अंदर पानी की समस्या रहती है, और वर्कर को अधिकतर शुद्ध पानी नहीं मिलता। हर कंपनी में वाटर फिल्टर होना चाहिए, जिससे वो वर्कर शुद्ध पानी पिएगा, शुद्ध स्वच्छ रहेगा। जब वो खुद कीड़े पर मकोड़े का पानी पिएगा तो किधर स्वच्छ रहेगा और कैसे काम कर पाएगा। अधिकतर वो कंपनी के अंदर ज्यादातर मच्छर ज्यादा रहते हैं सर, मच्छर की वजह से डेंगू मलेरिया ऐसे हो जाते हैं। तो हर हफ्ते में 2 बार उधर स्प्रे होना चाहिए, और क्लीनिंग के लिए हर कंपाउंड वाइज एक लेडीज रखनी चाहिए। भाई ये फ्रेश शॉप है तो इधर एक लेडीज, दूसरा मेंटेनेंस शॉप है तो उधर अलग लेडीज। हर कंपाउंड की रोज डेली सफाई होनी चाहिए, जिससे ना मच्छर पैदा होगा ना कुछ बीमारी आएगी। अगर बीमारी नहीं आएगी तो वर्कर स्वस्थ रहेगा, स्वस्थ रहेगा तो वो काम भी हंसी खुशी कर पाएगा।
पिंटू जी आप बताइए, आप क्या बोलेंगे अपने मैनेजमेंट को?
कंपनी में जाने से पहले पूरा साफ सफाई क्लीनिंग होनी चाहिए, पूरा मशीन फिशिंग सब पहली बार साफ सुथरा करना चाहिए, उसके बाद ही काम चालू करेंगे तो सबसे अच्छा रहेगा।
आप तीनों से एक और सवाल है, इस साल गर्मी काफी रही है, शायद पिछले साल से बहुत ज्यादा। तो आपके जहां आप काम करते हैं फैक्ट्री में, फैक्ट्री वालों ने कुछ किया कि आपकी वहां काम करने की सुविधा ठीक हो, कि वैसे ही जैसे 2 साल पहले था वैसे ही चलता रहा?
2 साल पहले था वैसा ही चलता है। उनको चाहिए प्रोडक्शन, उनको वर्कर का जरूरत नहीं रहता है। वो कल ये आएगा परसों दूसरा आएगा, उनको लगता है प्रोडक्शन निकलना होता है। उन्होंने फैन चेंज नहीं करते तो वर्कर का क्या ध्यान रखेंगे?
जयश्री जी?
हमारी कंपनी में है सर फैन लगवाया।
अच्छा,
तो लगा रहता है।
ये तो अच्छी बात है.
सुधारणा कशी झाली पाहिजे कंपनीमध्ये असं विचार.
ते म्हणजे ते जे लाईनवर लोक जास्त काम करते सर, त्यांच्यासाठी फॅन लावलेले आहेत, आणि जे कमी ह्याचे करतात असे बाहेर इकडे तिकडे काम करते त्यांच्यासाठी पण फॅन लावले
ते टॉयलेट आहे तुमच्या फॅक्टरी में मध्ये?
आहे.
साफ आहे?
साफ आहे. त्याला एक मॅडम लावलेली आहे टॉयलेट.
जो राम सिंह जी बोल रहे हैं वो ऑलरेडी उस फैक्ट्री में कर रहे हैं. राम सिंह जी, आपका क्या अनुभव है? ये पिछली आपकी फैक्ट्री में या बाकी फैक्ट्रियों में भी इतनी गर्मी के जो में काम कर रहे हैं लोग, कुछ
अभी
किया
कई साल
फैक्ट्री वालों ने?
हाँ, कई साल हमारे पास फैन नहीं था सर. अब की बार गर्मी चालू होते ही हमने सबसे पहले HR को बोला, भाई हमारे सुपरवाइजर को भी बोला इधर पंखा लगेगा तो ही हम काम करेंगे. अगर पंखा नहीं लगाया तो हम मशीन चलाएंगे नहीं, इधर गर्मी में हमारे से काम होने वाला है. तो उन्होंने पंखे की व्यवस्था की और लाइन पे हर आदमी के पास पंखा है, जो वर्कर आराम से काम कर सकता है, ज्यादा गर्म भी नहीं हो रहा है. पंखे की व्यवस्था करा दी.
आप लोगों का बहुत आभारी हूं. पर सरोजा, आप कह रही हैं कि कई सवाल आए हैं, तो अगर आप पूछ सकती है सवाल या मैं पूछ सकता हूं, पर मुझे सवाल बताइए. एक दो सवाल पूछ सकते हैं, समय है ना हमारे पास संदीप?
हाँ, मैं सवाल पूछ लेता हूँ, मैं देख रहा
आप ही
था.
पूछ लीजिए.
हाँ,
आप
मैं
ही
ही पूछ लेता हूँ. तो एक सवाल जो है कि ये जो कंपनियां आप लोगों के फैक्ट्रियों से पार्ट खरीदती हैं, आपके पूना में वो ज़्यादातर टाटा होता है, बजाज होता है, महिंद्रा होता है. हरियाणा में ज़्यादातर मारुति होता है, हीरो होता है, होंडा होता है, राइट? ये जो कंपनियां हैं, आपको क्या लगता है कि ये कंपनियां क्या कर सकती हैं ताकि आपका फैक्ट्री जो हो वो बेहतर हो, आपके काम की जो कंडीशंस हैं, जो सेफ्टी है वो बेहतर हो, और उससे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा?
एक तो जब विजिट होती है सर, जैसे हमारे यहाँ महाराष्ट्र में टाटा मोटर का पार्ट हम मारते हैं. हमारी कंपनी में टाटा मोटर की विजिट होती है. जब विजिट होती है उस समय सबसे पहले उनको सेफ्टी का ध्यान देना चाहिए. जो विजिटर बाहर से आ रहे हैं कि भाई कंपनी का हम विजिट करेंगे, तो पहला नंबर तो यही होना चाहिए कि हर वर्कर को सेफ्टी है या नहीं है. ज्यादातर कंपनियां क्या करती है, जिस दिन विजिट रहेगी उसी दिन उसको हेलमेट देगी, एयरबैग देगी, सेफ्टी बूट देगी, हैंड ग्लोव देगी, और वो निकल के गए, बाकी सब गायब. इसलिए सबसे पहले जो भी कंपनी है बड़ी, वो अगर विजिट करने को आ रही है, विजिट कर रहे हैं, तो सबसे पहले वर्कर्स की ओर ध्यान दें. उनको पानी पीने के लिए कैसी व्यवस्था है, उनके संडास बाथरूम क्लीनिक है कि नहीं है, वो भी देखना उनका काम है. क्योंकि वर्कर सेफ रहेगा तो उनको माल अच्छा मिलता रहेगा, हर टाइम स्वस्थ रहेगा आदमी. सबसे पहले सेफ्टी उनकी देखनी जरूरी है सर.
ये बताइए कि ये राजा का सवाल था. राजा, थैंक यू. एक और मैं फॉलोअप सवाल पूछता हूँ इससे पहले कि हम अगले पैनल पे चलें. वो ये इसी से मिलता जुलता, कोई तीनों में से कोई भी जवाब दे सकते हैं या तीनों जवाब दे सकते हैं. अगर ये जो बड़ी कंपनियों से ऑडिटर आते हैं, जो हमारे वर्कर्स बताते हैं कि वर्कर से कभी बात करते नहीं हैं,
नहीं करते हैं सर.
नहीं करते हैं, ऐसा हमें मतलब 95% जो वर्कर हमारे पास हैं वो यही कहते हैं.
99% ऐसे वर्कर हैं सर जिनसे वो विजिटर से कोई संबंध नहीं रहता है. वो आएंगे और चले गए. वो सुपरवाइजर से बात करेंगे, उधर खड़े रहकर डायरेक्ट ऑफिस
ये बताइए और तीनों
करेंगे, बाहर निकल के चले जाएंगे.
ये तीनों एक एक करके बताइए. और ये आखिरी सवाल है. देखिए, वो आपसे बात नहीं करते, ये आप भी कह रहे हो, और सारे हमारे 15,000 वर्कर या ऑटो सेक्टर के 11,000 वर्कर यही बात बोल रहे हैं हमें. तो सच तो है ये, इसमें तो कोई शक नहीं है. लेकिन अगर वो आप लोगों से बात करते तो उनको क्या फायदा होता? क्या उनको कोई फायदा होता या उनकी कंपनियों को फायदा हो? क्या वो कुछ ऐसी चीज समझ सकते, सीख सकते जिनसे उनको फायदा होता?
वो अगर हमारे से बात करेंगे तो हम हमारे बारे में भी उनको बताएंगे, भाई कंपनी में हम आपके लिए ये काम कर रहे हैं, आपकी कंपनी के लिए हम रात दिन मेहनत कर रहे हैं, आपको भी बढ़ा रहे हैं, हमारे मालिक को भी आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं. मगर हमारी सेफ्टी के लिए ये चीज होनी चाहिए सर. जैसे आज आप आए तो हमारे को ये सब सेफ्टी है, और कल आप निकल जाओगे ये सेफ्टी खत्म हो जाएगी. इसलिए हमारी ये सेफ्टी हमेशा के लिए आप बात करोगे तो हमेशा के लिए लागू रहेगी. इसलिए हमारी यही मांग है कि भाई जब भी कोई बाहर का बड़ा विजिटर आए तो वर्कर से 100% बात करें. क्योंकि वर्कर की कोई नहीं सुनता, मालिक लोग नहीं सुनते, HR लोग नहीं सुनता, कोई नहीं सुनता है। सुनने के लिए वो आदमी अगर सुनेंगे तो वो उस चीज को ध्यान में लेंगे कि नहीं यार, बाहर का विजिटर आया है और वर्करों ने ऐसा कंप्लेंट दिया है, इसलिए ये होना चाहिए।
ठीक है। और आप दोनों दूसरे आप दोनों कोई और बोलना चाहेंगे इस बात पे कि उनको क्या फायदा होगा? क्या उनको कोई फायदा होगा अपने बिजनेस में, अपनी क्वालिटी में, प्रोडक्शन में, ऐसी चीजें समझने में जो मालिक कभी नहीं बताएगा, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर कभी नहीं बताएगा, HR कभी नहीं बताएगा, पर आप बता सकते हो, तो उनको बिजनेस के बारे में भी कुछ ज्यादा समझ आएगी, ऐसा कुछ है?
ऐसे अगर उनका प्रोजेक्ट है तो वो लोग क्या करते हैं, समझ लो वर्कर के पास वो HR जाने ही
थोड़ा
नहीं
थोड़ा थोड़ा बीच में आना, आपकी आवाज थोड़ी कट रही है, माइक के पास आओ थोड़ा। हाँ जी, दोबारा बताइए।
देता। उनका कैसा रहता है, अगर ऑडिट के लिए वो आए तो HR होगा या साहब होगा या सुपरवाइजर होगा, वो वर्कर के पास आने ही नहीं देते। क्योंकि अगर वर्कर दूसरा ही कुछ अगर बात करेगा तो उनका जो प्रोडक्शन वो कंपनी का उनको मिला रहता है ना, वो वर्कर कुछ बोलेगा तो उनका वो काम जो है वो चला जाएगा करके वो वर्कर के पास ऑडिट वाले को आने ही नहीं देते। इधर उधर घुमाएंगे, डायरेक्ट जाके ऑफिस में बिठाएंगे, उनका उनका बात चलेगा, वो चला जाएगा। इसलिए वर्कर के पास आने का चांस ही नहीं रहता है। वर्कर को खाली छुट्टी दिया जा रहता है उस दिन, वो अपना अपना काम में बिजी रहता है, वो आते घूम के चले जाते।
ठीक है। राहुल, थैंक यू सो मच। राहुल, बैक टू यू, आप जो क्लोज करना चाहें जैसे
नहीं,
भी।
आपका सवाल ही है संदीप, उसका जयश्री जी आपके विचार में कुछ
मेरे विचार में
कि अगर, हाँ जगदीप बताएंगे, आप समझे, जस्ट एक्सप्लेन टू जयश्री के सवाल क्या था।
सर का मन कहना है कि कोई अगर ऑडिटर बाहर से आता है आपकी फैक्ट्री में तो उस टाइम सेफ्टी रिलेटेड क्या वर्कर से बात करना चाहिए, क्या
नहीं नहीं
चाहिए?
नहीं 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 नहीं, जगदीप
नहीं,
रुको,
वो क्या
मराठी
कह
में
रहे
बताओ।
हैं जयश्री
हाँ,
जी, एक मिनट जगदीप, तुम्ही सांगा जरा, इफ द कंपनी ब्रांड और देयर ऑडिटर कम्स, वो जब आएंगे वहां, तो अगर वो वर्कर कुछ उनको बताए तो उनको क्या फायदा मिलेगा वर्कर की बात सुन के? ब्रांड समझ लो टाटा से, जैसे कह रहे थे राम सिंह जी, अगर टाटा से जयश्री जी की फैक्ट्री में कोई आएगा या बजाज से आएगा
हाँ
और
हाँ।
वर्कर से बातचीत करेंगे, तो वो बजाज वाले को क्या फायदा, वो पूछ रहे हैं संदीप।
बजट वाले थे वो क्या बोलते हैं, हम वर्कर को बात हम बोलेंगे वर्कर को ही, तो भी हम उसकी बात नहीं सुनेंगे क्योंकि हमारा फायदा होता है इसमें, वो बात नहीं सुनते हैं। बजट वाले तो हमारा कंपनी में बजट वाले से आते हैं। हाँ, वो इसलिए कॉन्ट्रैक्टदार भी उसके पीछे ही रहते हैं और सुपरवाइजर भी उसके पीछे रहते हैं, क्योंकि चाहे वो हमारे पास आएंगे या हम लोग उसके पास जाएंगे कोई बात करेंगे, तो वो बोलते हैं कोई भी हमारे पास आएगा भी, कोई बोलेगा भी, तो हमको उसको कुछ नहीं फर्क पड़ता है कि हमका काम मिलना चाहिए, हमारा फायदा होना चाहिए,
चलो ठीक
इसके
है।
सिवा कुछ भी नहीं बोलते।
नहीं 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 नहीं, ठीक है। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप तीनों का। फिर से बहुत आभारी हूँ कि आप लोगों ने अपना समय निकाला, हमारे साथ आए, हमारे वर्कर सेंटर में आए, और हमारी इच्छा यही है कि आप लोग जैसे हैं, आप लोग एक तरीके से हमारे दूत हैं। आप जाके बाहर सब अपने बाकी श्रमिकों को बताइए, और आप देखिए कि अगर आप में से रोज सिर्फ एक और वर्कर को बताएगा, और वो वर्कर एक और वर्कर को बताएगा हर दिन, तो 30 दिन के बाद आप गणित कर लीजिए, हजारों वर्कर को पता लग जाएगा कि सेफ्टी और ईएसआईसी का क्या फायदा है उनको। इससे बढ़कर ज्यादा कोई कम्युनिकेशन कभी नहीं हो सकती। तो बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप लोगों का, आप आए हमारे साथ। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
थैंक यू सर।
थैंक यू।
बैक टू संदीप
Sandeep.
or somebody.
Yeah, it's me. Okay, so thank you so much. For the audience, Rahul is our senior advisor and actually is a very senior ex-CEO in India who in the last role was actually advising Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla on setting up BITSOM, the BITS School of Management. But before that, he was the CEO of Carbon Black and of Indogulf Fertilizer, a very senior executive we are very pleased and proud that has joined us and is helping us in our agenda. Sakshi, can you change the screens? I will now start the next panel, but before I do, I just want to say one thing to the last point that we were trying to draw out of workers, and I think the audience understand themselves. But just to stress the point, you see, even the workers are not aware of the business benefits of improving their working conditions. None of them could argue that. It's because we have kept our workers so ill-informed, so unaware, that they don't understand that by them being provided good working conditions, it's good for business. And that's the point we have been able to convince the Indian government, and that's why the last economic survey that Saroja mentioned, 24-25, has this argument that we have been presenting that worker safety, working conditions, and social security are good for business at a unit level, at an industry level, and at a country level. So we are glad you're here. Thank you so much. I'll move on to the next and the last panel of our experts. Thank you so much. We have three panelists here who are really very appropriate experts in this area that we are discussing today. Mr. Vineet Kaul, if you can start putting them one by one on screen, Sakshi. He has 5 decades of senior global human resources experience. He's worked with very large companies in very senior positions in HR and otherwise, Aditya Birla Group, Hindalco, Philips, but also auto sector, Yamaha, Eicher, in fact, also Tata Motors in his previous avatar. And therefore, perfect for us to be here. Vineet will talk to you in a bit. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll introduce our next panelist, Dr. Sophie Joseph. She's Associate Professor of Law at National Law School, NLU, Delhi. She's also a Director of Center for Labor Research and Advocacy. She's a specialist, obviously, therefore, in labor, in development, also in gender. And she has an immense body of work, including policy and legislative drafting for ILO, for Ministry of Labor, and indeed for Supreme Court. So thank you and welcome, Sophie. The last and not the least, Ms. Bharti Birla. Again, her expertise is in enterprise development. She's an enterprise development specialist, which clearly is very important for our discussion today. She has worked deeply with ILO's decent work in South Asia, which is really relevant for what we are discussing today. And her body of work includes sustainable, productivity, enterprises and productivity, decent work in global supply chains, which is again relevant because we're talking of supply chains today, including occupational safety and health. And she's an author and an international trainer. So once again, thank you, Vineet, Sophie, and Bharti for joining us. I will start with a very simple question for you based on our report. You just heard the report findings. You just heard the workers themselves speaking about it. I'll go one by one and then we can have some discussion. And feel free to interrupt, say whatever you feel like anytime. We'll have a conversation for 20-25 minutes. It's not really a one-way thing at all. And then we'll do Q&A audience, so please stay back. My first simple question is, having heard what you've heard about the accidents and injuries in the supply chain of top brands in the country, and auto sector being 1/3 at least of Indian manufacturing GDP, and employs anywhere from 1 to 3 crore workers, add families as 5 to 10% of India, right? What do you think is the corporate responsibility of these brands towards the supply chain and their workers? And what's the opportunity here that they may be seeing but not doing enough about it? They should do more about it. Or it's not an opportunity at all. It's just a cost for India, and forget it. We are cost chasers. Let's continue chasing cost and forget about workers and just try doing cheap production. Vineet, as an HR man who's done ESIC, safety, workers, unions, the works, please.
Thank you, Sandeep. And again, my compliments to you and SafeIn Foundation. You're really embarked on a very good journey, and I'm sure इसका काफी लोगों को फायदा होगा हमारे देश में, तो बहुत मेरी तरफ से आपको सब शुभेच्छाएं. Coming to brand and reputation, well, my understanding of brand, of course, I am not a great marketer, but basically a brand is a perception or a reputation or an emotional connect with the audience or customers, etc., that companies try to do, which is right. Now, when you talk of this, I'm reminded of a few. There are many cases like this where people have woken up, like 2, 3 of these international examples. The famous one, was the famous Nike sweatshops. Nike,
Yeah.
the world famous brand, and when reports emerged that the way they were getting their products made, and literally that is, you go anywhere to Google sweatshops, you'll get the details. It really shook that company up, and frankly, they understood and they rose to the occasion and took steps. I don't think they had any choice. They're to the wall. The second example that comes to me is of Foxconn. Foxconn, incidentally, you may be aware, is Apple's biggest supplier was in China. And incidentally, that time, reports of forced overtime, employee suicides, working safety, जो आप लोगों ने बताया, वो तो बिल्कुल उससे खराब था. They were forced to really act on it. And one of the reasons they pulled out a lot of work from China is also this. HMM, Sandeep ji, UK, and big name. They had serious issues in Bangladesh and Cambodia. This whole low-cost binge that many multinationals or companies, like even Indian companies, rush to. It's not simple. It's got its guardrails. So they also had to really look at the unsafe working conditions specifically in these 2 countries that were highlighted. And why go far? And I can share 2 experiences in our country जो आप लोग relate कर पाओ. I talked of Apple manufacturing, which today is big in India. इसकी पहली कंपनी जहाँ काम शुरू हुआ था उसका नाम था विस्ट्रॉन. एंड आप लोगों को याद होगा दिसंबर 2020 में बहुत बड़ा तमाशा हुआ था. There was a big strike, and suddenly, of all the people, Apple rushed to the government first. I'm sharing with you very clearly because I have information, because the unsafe conditions and the labor practices came out. Wistron was what Foxconn is today for Apple, and there were 4,000 contract labor and 800 normal workmen. Overtime was galore, beating all acts. Safety and other working conditions were equally bad. And the issue erupted on a thing of wrong payment, timely wages, etc. And everybody got into action. Apple shook. And one of the reasons Wistron was replaced. So these are big brands. And coming to auto sector, there was a famous, better not to name the company, in 2012 where, a death took place in the plant and there's a riot around and many people and managers got injured, etc. It made headlines. And believe me, I can share with you, I was contacted of all the persons by a big investment firm who gets FIIs into India. And the person requested me to join a call with about 5, 6 of the FIIs. And their question or understanding from me was, hey, tell us one thing, what is the situation in India about industrial relations? How is it, apart from the individual company, where I said it is not fair for me to comment, but on practices in India, how you all handle things, etc. They were very keen to know. So what I'm saying is, one company's reputation going for a toss on such an incident of safety or labor matters, A, affects the company, and B, affects even the country's investment as an investment destination. And this is my own personal experience apart from what you read in the press. Now, having said that, see, you can always start digging the well जब आग लग जाती है. But the fact is, when you know things, and I was listening, ये जो अभी मेरे कामगार ये जो भाई बहन बता रहे थे कि पानी नहीं है, ठंडा होना चाहिए. फैक्ट्रीज एक्ट 1948 का, मैं अभी की लेबर कोड्स की नहीं बात कर रहा हूँ, उसमें लिखा गया है कि समर महीने में ठंडा पानी होगा. 48 में डेजर्ट कूलर नहीं थे, वाटर कूलर्स नहीं थे, उस टाइम एक्ट में डाला हुआ है. और आज भी अगर कंपनीज कर दी रहे, मतलब इसके आगे क्या बोल सकते हैं. हमारे पास पढ़े लिखे इंजीनियर्स, मैनेजमेंट ग्रेजुएट्स और बड़े अनपढ़ तो लोग हैं नहीं अभी आजकल, मैनेजर्स और ओनर्स. ये है, ये जो क्लीनिंग की बात कर रहे, ये भी 60 साल पुराने एक्ट में लिखा हुआ है. So what I'm saying is हमारे देश में कायदा है, जानकारी है, इंटेंट है, मगर इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की कमी है. However, coming to this very clearly, I think what you asked very clearly, reputation does take a hit, will take a hit. It's just that I think there is some amount of what he shared about the audits and all that. It's unfortunate that auditors or even maybe the consulting companies who do sustainability audits, I don't know what they audit, because if you look at the GRI and other parameters on which they are supposed to do audit, it very clearly talks of supply chain audits. And if they are just accepting a report, then I think the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has to really look into how these things are being done. Let's be very clear about it. So, having said that, I know I've taken a little more time, Sandeep, but the fact is, my colleagues will join me in saying is, there is knowledge available. There's no dearth of knowledge. The laws and more laws will come. No doubt on that. Everybody will agree, yes, these things are necessary. But the only thing is, some things like I shared with you, unless the rubber hits the road or some sparks go around, which shouldn't happen, wake up is much different. And I can tell you, it's not that nothing has been done in this area. And Madam Bharti Birla ji, she's there. I have been with the employer organizations, and I was mentioning, thanks to ILO, we run have run some batches of responsible business conduct, where basically these aspects of safety, labor relations, and governance, etc., are conveyed and facilitated to MSME sector. And ironically, Sandeep and friends, we have covered mostly the auto sector there, supply chain. So we have, I think about a year and a half, done 3 batches, one in Pune, one in NCR, and one in Chennai. Yours truly, sir. About 100 people have been covered. Now, thatly I will push again, and we will try again to do it. So there is some work happening, but is it adequate? Is it enough? Not after what you hear and what research you all say. It's a fact.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Vineet. I mean, your point about the reputational risk that brands have and the implication for investments is a point I wanted to pick up also, because, you know, we don't go overseas with our reports actually, but it does get picked up. And we know that certain investors, without talking, would take a view on investments, and they differentiate between brands as to who's better, who's worse. So it's an important point from current geopolitical view also. I'll come to you, Dr. Sophie. From your perspective, labor laws, what's your take on brands' responsibility with your perspective?
I think I will take from what Mr. Vineet Kaul just mentioned. So compliance is very important. At the same time, implementation of laws are very important. What generally been talked around labor laws is we have 44 central legislations. We had 44 central legislations so far, but it was not implemented properly. As we look at ILO standards, especially core labor standards and decent work agenda, has been very clear on at least 5 indicators. One is freedom of association. The other one is elimination of forced labor, no discrimination at employment and occupation, and no child labor. And finally, which was added in 2022, was about safe and healthy working environment. So we understand that there is this emphasis on freedom of association, no forced labor. In India, we have a very expanded definition of forced labor from the Supreme Court to state that even non-payment of minimum wages is equivalent to forced labor. So jurisprudence-wise, law-wise, we have such expanded view on labor rights. But when it comes to implementation, there is a lack of political will that we generally see around to enforce labor standards. Let's look at the recent strikes that happened in Noida and in multiple places which were underreported across media. We see that the major reason for the strike was non-payment of wages and the long working hours, which is the basic human right both under the international human rights paradigm and also under the constitutional rights. So non-payment of minimum wage and or longer working hours, coupled with no social security and no safety measures. Look at the vulnerability that workers are currently undergoing. And we also see that even the visible organizations, industrial production units, are not registered or licensed under the law. We all know the story of Munka fire tragedy in 2022. So when you look at the production units across, especially smaller production units, there is definitely fragmentation. Fragmentation is resulting in, especially from the women labor lens, there is feminization, and feminization further leading to ghettoization of very vulnerable, precarious workers. So coupled with non-compliance, coupled with vulnerable standard of workers, we see our compliance standards going down and workers going from vulnerability to precarity to any basic violation of constitutional standards that we talk about from the grand norm in our Magna Carta, which is constitution. I'll stop here and come back.
Thank you, Sophie. You talked about freedom of association, and the data point from our 15,000 workers is probably less than 100 workers of the 15,000 are unionized in any shape or form in the supply chain of auto sector, and that obviously creates all this power imbalance and a lack of good working conditions. One question for you before I move to Bharti. You said non-payment of minimum wages is also seen as forced labor. Is it true that overtime rate not getting paid at double the rate as prescribed by law and working hours beyond the labor code is also considered forced labor or similar?
Absolutely. So the concept of wages basically say that wages is for 8 hours working day. And if anyone is working beyond 8 hours working day, supposed to be paid extra. The rate is also mentioned. So any underpaid or non-paid overtime working hours would be violation of the wage ceiling that the Act talk about. Because ultimately overtime wages comes under the law relating to wages.
Got it. Thank you. It's a very important point which we had not thought through clearly, and the brands who are here today, I know at least 2 or 3 brands who are there today listening to us right now, and these videos go out to all brands later on. Couple of things.
I'm sorry, if I can mention the case title. The case title is Asiad Games case of 1982.
Asiad Games 1982. Team, please note. Just to the brands who are here and other business people who are here, I think you hear about what is now legally forced labor that's producing these components of automobiles. And also, although we don't get involved in this at all, but if the brand CSR departments can think about the living conditions of these workers in the communities around factories, I think that would be good, not just for workers, but your own productivity, your own, quality of components and everything else that gets connected to working conditions. And that brings me perfectly to Bharti, because you work in this area, you know exactly, what the brands can do and cannot do, and the decent working conditions that you worked upon in supply chain. What's your perspective?
Thanks so much, Sandeep. I think we are talking about responsible business conduct now, but ILO in 1977 came up with what we call as ILO MNE declaration, which is a declaration which speaks to the multinational enterprises and large national enterprises and the governments to look at how we can promote responsible business conduct, not just in the big companies, but also in the supply chains. This is 1977. And this also refers, this MNE declaration also refers to what Dr. Sophie mentioned, the core labor rights or the fundamental labor rights, which are the core of the labor rights, which are at par with human rights. So you can, every human, whether it's a contract worker, migrant worker, everyone, piece rate worker must have, no forced labor, no child labor, right to equality and non-discrimination, and right to organize, unionize, and collectively bargain. And also, as Dr. Sophie mentioned, in June 22, OSH, Occupational Health and Safety, or Safe and Healthy Working Environment, became a fundamental right. So MNE declaration refers to this human and business rights, UNGPs, all refer to the ILO MNE declaration, which was much ahead of its time. It came out in 1977, but its importance has increased over the years now. We see that ILO MNE declaration is actually being referred by multilateral agreements, trade agreements, due diligence frameworks, which the different countries are now having these due diligence framework, like or market access, through the trade agreements, or disclosure reporting. Like in India, we have the NGRBC, but there are other instruments like UK Modern Slavery Act, which also calls for these kind of disclosures by the companies. So it's not really something new. It was always there, but now we are finding the importance of it to be growing. I think most of the companies see responsible business conduct or responsible business reporting as a compliance exercise. We heard the discussion on audits, for example. Now, it should go beyond a compliance exercise. It is not about compliance. It is actually fundamentally about how companies should manage risk, how they should manage people, and also their long-term productivity and competitiveness. When we are talking about responsible business conduct, we are also talking about what the investors are looking for, what the customers are looking at. I mean, would you really like to buy cars where the people's hands have been cut, or buy sugar for chocolates if the women have to let go of their wombs? Those kind of things are causing a lot of bad reputation for the businesses. And unless businesses understand that it's a very big business risk that they are taking by not addressing these issues. So it's not about just compliance, it's a business strategy. Most of the time, businesses leave it to the HR department. And I would say that it should be actually at the board level, at the CEO level, where these things need to be discussed, because it's part of that business strategy. You need to invest on it because it is important for the business. It looks at how you can get entry into large global markets. It is about business resilience. It is about attracting good talent and retention. And also about it's about not just your own company, the entire sector gets branded if something happens in the supply chain, and for that matter the entire country. If something goes wrong in one supply chain, one actor, the entire sector gets blamed for it, and then it impacts the countries also. So the very workers that we are trying to protect also get more into trouble because companies close, workers lose jobs. So it's good for everyone to focus on responsible business conduct. And I think one of the things that we also need to understand is that when we focus on occupational health and safety, and when the companies look at themselves, but also their supply chain and their vendors, it can actually increase productivity, it can improve quality, it can help in retaining skilled workers, reduce absenteeism, and very strong industrial relations. We've done a lot of trainings jointly with the management on occupational health and safety, where we find that if these joint trainings are done, if there is a workers' participation in the OSH committees, for example, then the number of incidents actually reduce because workers know where the problems are. But these things, when they don't happen, they actually create more challenges for workers as well as for the businesses. And I think, when we talk about how much losses companies make, just to illustrate, in one of the ILO study, we found that the global loss because of occupational health and safety, whether it is absenteeism or whether it is people losing the machine operations getting closed, or the payments that need to be made to the workers, there is an actual loss of 4% of global GDP. That's at the global level. But if you actually look at the company level, I'm sure the profits of the company, they will be also losing 4% of their profits, or maybe more, because that's a global average. But when it comes to company level, they not only lose this profits, but they also lose reputation, which is very hard to build. So I think it's very important for companies to look at not just themselves, but how they can handhold their vendors, not just for quality, not just for upgrading the material, but also upgrading the lives of the workers who are doing these things. So when they do human rights due diligence, they should build capacities of their vendors to invest on workers, invest on safety. And we've also seen that when it is a brand pressure to do something, the moment pressure goes, the impact goes. But when companies take it as their own mandate, as their own vision or mission, then it's a very different thing. And in that, we really like to congratulate EFI and other employers membership based organizations, because if things come from them, those things are more sustainable. And I think that's very important to have employers, organizations, trade unions. And recently we facilitated a bipartite roadmap between employers and workers, the central trade unions and the employers federations, to take this joint responsibility. And I think those could be one of the ways to make sure that these don't remain on paper, but they actually get to the implementation level. Thank you.
And I think that's fantastic. You have all the experience to really tell us and tell everybody else here that this is good for business, and it is not just a moral imperative, right? Which people often perceive as the moment we talk about this issue. This is a real business and economy issue, which brands being so big and so influential, and like you said, if brands could come together and create a joint platform with so much of common supply chain across countries, and especially across the state. The 3 brands which are big in Haryana, 3 brands which are big in Maharashtra. If those 3 brands came together, even that state, and tried doing things with the state government, this could shift and it'll be good for everybody. There is no doubt about it, right? So thank you. A couple of anecdotes you reminded me before I come back around for one more question is Dunu Roy, who's also our senior advisor and one of the nation builders, always says that, Sandeep, worker safety is seen by business as something about only workers. But the reality is that the driver safety is connected with worker safety, because safer factories produce better quality products. And better quality products are safer for the drivers and for the car and the two-wheeler and the truck and the bus. So it's not unrelated. If Japanese factories are good in the supply chain, they do produce very safe cars, and so, or Germans even more so, right? So there is a correlation here of driver safety, consumer safety, and worker safety, which something is getting missed on. And my father used to say on reputation all the time that it takes years to build your reputation, beta, he would say. It'll take a day to lose it. Be very careful. Right? So I think that's really important. I'll go around one more round before we open to Q&A. So please post your questions, and we'll show you one video shortly after this round of questions, a 3-minute video, which actually shows workers identifying the brands they're working for and how they display that. It's just a short video. Sakshi, be ready for that after this round. I'll come back to you, Sakshi. So Vineet, back to you, right? You heard Bharti, you heard Sophie, you have a manufacturing sector experience. We talk about appointment letters not being there. We talk about ESIC cards not being there, right? Basic safety mechanisms not being there. At least the first 2 are clear HR issues. Now, from your HR expertise, why don't these things happen? What's the problem? Is it very expensive? Is it too difficult? Or is it just apathy, missed opportunity? What is it? You're on mute.
From what Ms. Bharti said, just take a cue from that. Point is moving from compliance to commitment. What she said very clearly in terms of companies. And Sandeep, you mentioned about Japan and Europe. Entire auto industry has gone 40, 50 years back when the growth started happening in India and picked up everything from Japan. Rightly so. So the learnings of productivity or trying to get the maximum was learned. But nobody, I think, spent enough time on looking at safety in Japan, which is very primary from those days itself. Anyway, coming to a point you mentioned, see, I can only say one thing. It is not some rocket science to make an appointment letter. Right? The moment a taxation or a revenue issue circular is issued by the government, how much time do people have to delay it in terms of either a return or a form to be filled? Just tell me, how much time do people get? And yes, some people do crib, this is a GST, this, that headache and all that. Finally, all fall in line. So I have not heard after 50, 40 years, people complaining that this was not done on that financial requirement. So what I'm trying to say is that somewhere the priority of people, and I'll just give one example. You know, some years back in Chorus, which is one of the companies run by an Indian company, a contract engineer or technician was crushed again. A bad accident, unfortunately. The compensation they had to pay was what? I just looked at 1.5 million pounds. So that is the, I'm not saying that you have to give blood money or cost money like this, but that is the compensation for one particular injury or death, fatality. So the point I'm making is, in India, unfortunately, we take these things lightly. The whole thing on Factories Act became a little looked at after the Bhopal case study. 85, 86, you had the safety officer appointment amendment coming. You had something about occupier, etc. I'm not saying we should wait till then. So that is one challenge that is there. So coming to HR or any other department, even if it's not HR, many companies don't have an HR department. To give an ESI card, which comes from the ESI department, is holding up the card. Nothing else. जो लोगों ने बताया कि हमको दिया नहीं. I don't think some great value addition activity has to happen on that further. It has just to be handed over. So this is a little. And coming to the administrative part of making an appointment letter, many of the small scale companies may not have a full-time department. I can understand. They don't at times have a full-time finance manager, but they get one part-time guy to come for a few days. You know it. Even the smallest place will get a finance guy to run because accounting mein gafla nahi chahiye kisi ko. But here things will be taken to chance. And the last but not the least, and Sophia ma'am also touched on it. The way people can get away is still very easy in this country. I am not saying penal action is necessary for everyone, but there is more time spent with lawyers, sorry to use the word term, in finding out how can we circumvent the law, rather than spending time is how do we follow the law. And incidentally on unionism, etc., maybe I'll just give a slight information. As a country, we haven't signed the, you know ma'am what I'm talking about, Villa ma'am, right to organize convention. And you know Sophie, right to organize and unionize convention of ILO has not been signed by a country for principal reasons. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. So whatever getting at is whether it is a appointment letter and these basics as I call it, I think they are very rudimentary.
Yeah.
And it is just a escapism or neglect at the least. I don't think it's a big functional disability, etc., that we can't give or pass on an ESI card. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. And you know, again, we keep saying to brands that these kind of things, that they start pushing the supply chain, they can make a big difference, because we have seen a correlation between non-compliance with ESIC and accidents. i.e., professional company is both safer and better compliant, and an unsafe company is also non-compliant and less productive. So, you know, we need businesses to move, and I'll come to Bangladesh in a bit, and maybe one of you can mention it. But Sophie, the new labor codes and their implementation rules and all the challenges that would automatically come into play, you know, with state variations and everything else. Do you see a hope? Do you see, you know, something that can be done better than the past with the clarity of these new labor codes and the stress on appointment letters and stuff like that?
I think there we should start with the enforcement mechanism under the OSH code. So now we have inspector cum facilitator under the code. So there are a lot of the things in the OSH code talking about appointment letter. We already talked about an appointment letter. And appointment letter is not a new legislative idea. It was already, there is a traditional practice in the industry, and it was also there in the legislation called Sign Workers Act. So it is legislative ideas borrowed from Sign Workers Act, and now it is mandatory to be distributed to all workers. And that is also form mentioned in Rule 6. So while the appointment letter is a very welcoming a legislative idea to put in such code, because the workers are ultimately getting a document to assert their working conditions now. But it is again subject to compliance by the employers. And talking about overtime hours, overtime work, overtime payment of wages, or payment of wages for overtime working hours, we also see that the standard has been kept much earlier, both under the Minimum Wages Act and under the Factories Act. It has been doubled the wages. However, when you look at the code on wages, now Section 27 of the OSH, when it talks about overtime working hours, it says the total cap of overtime working hours can be determined by the appropriate government. So it's a proviso. So while the main section talk about the rate of payment for overtime working hours, the proviso talking about the capping to be decided by the appropriate appropriate government. So we don't know how appropriate government is going to decide the capping, because it shouldn't go beyond the hours that we are generally talking about, right? Because 48 hours is the weekly hours, and it shouldn't go beyond 12 hours, including overtime working hours. And when the freedom is given to the appropriate government, because we largely know the debate just before the final draft of the OSH, because there was a lot of back and forth on how to increase the daily working hours up to 12 hours or more than 12 hours, and then accordingly doing in the sense contrasting off in the weekly working hours. So overtime working hours, though the provision is retained, but the proviso requires a little more constructive engagement. And when it comes to safety committees, again, the safety committees under the OSH code, it generally talks about establishing safety committee. But equal representation of representatives from the workers and employers. But when it comes to safety officers, it makes a scale very clearly. So only where the workers are employed, more than 500 workers are employed, or 250 workers are employed, or 100 workers are employed in mines. So it's a very scaled up mechanism that safety officers under the OSH code. And why is that so? We all know that the industries are going fragmented. The investment has gone in such a fashion that the major campuses have been fragmented into small industrial production units for a long time now. So it's this point of time we are talking about a certain scale of working population to have safety officer. In every, especially in automobile industry where there is metal work, there has to be a safety officer. So we see this half-baked legal provisions in essence, or in principle, whether it talks about appointment letter, yes. In principle, whether it talk about overtime wages, yes. In principle, whether it talk about safety officer, yes. But when you look at the wordings in the law, very clearly, there is a lot of constructive engagement that we need to make. Even look at the women's provision. One of the objectives of Occupation Safety Code was portrayed as strengthening women's participation in employment. The only provision that women's empowerment being talked about under the Code on Wages is under Section 3 and 4, wherein it says that all gender would get equal pay for equal work, which is not a new phenomenon. And also talking about equal participation in seniority, promotion, recruitment, etc., which was also all low. There's nothing new there. Whereas there was long-term debate on how social reproduction responsibilities of women should be read into the industrial laws, and they should be given certain flexible working conditions, considering their triple burden in their work life, in order to maintain their work-life balance. And when you look at factories, again, the OSH code, the only two provisions wherein, only one provision wherein women's rights being mentioned as night work, right? And night work, it is based on their consent, and safety provisions are being met by the employer. And in a place where there is a lot of power asymmetry, as we discussed, the consent goes for a toss. I don't know how much consent women can exercise, a women worker can exercise in such a scenario. So all of these need to be, you need to have a standard operating procedure around how is it going to be operationalized in industries.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think I will come back again in the next class.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I'll pick up your point on gender and women workers in the auto sector specifically, because we know that ACMA, Automobile Component Manufacturers Association, has been tasked with increasing women workforce in the auto sector. And you are absolutely right. Unless the rules and the laws and the practices are discussed and some practical work is done around it, it's going to be only paper, right? So your point is well made. I think ACMA should be listening to it and talking to you about it, really. Sorry, Sophie, you want to make a point?
Yeah, I really want to make this point. Under OSH Code Section 110, it says if there is a grievance to the inspector cum facilitator, the inspector cum facilitator, before filing a complaint, an opportunity should be given to the employer about the grievance made. So you are diluting to the extent that even after a complaint being raised, you're still giving an opportunity before going for prosecution.
Correct.
So it becomes a teethless tiger then.
Yeah. No, you're right. And we have been asking the brands that they should open up their grievance mechanism to their suppliers' workers, because that adds an additional protection for the workers and maybe a hope for better action. Bharti, I'll come to you last question as of now in this round before Sakshi. Just play that video. And Gaurav, I'm assuming you're around. I'll come back to you after the video. Bharti, a couple of global practices, if you could. Just hold on, Sakshi, not yet. Bharti, a couple of global practices or best practices that you can tell us about or tell our brands about, our businesses about, where an industry or a country has done something around these lines of improving safety, improving working conditions, and gained from it at a business level or a country level.
Sure. I mean, the first thing where these gains have been made is when we have recognized that there is a problem, accepting that there is a problem, because unless we accept that there is a problem, then we can't work on it. So we've seen, I have not personally worked in the automobile sector, but I've worked a lot in the garment sector, in the tea plantation, coffee, rubber plantations. And one of the things that we saw was when people say, okay, yes, I understand there's a problem. Let me do human rights due diligence in my supply chain. Let me see what the problems are. Let me map my supply chain. Who are my vendors? Who are my vendors' vendors? You don't need to disclose it to anyone. It's for you. But if you find any challenges, then how do you really address those? And it could be an incremental approach. It could be an approach where you take the trade unions and workers together, because once you start discussing problems, the solutions also come from the workers. And I've seen many times workers coming forward and say, okay, you can't do this, let us also contribute, we will do this from our side. So unless you talk, unless you have a dialogue, the workers also don't understand your problems. So, for example, we were working in Nepal in the metal sector, and we found that there's a problem of using mercury for Buddha statues. Mercury, young women, Sophie was talking about women, young women were applying gold and mercury amalgam to polish the statues, and then they fire, the mercury evaporates, and the gold Buddha statues is left. And if mercury is used, these women will not be able to work after 10 years, and they're all women from childbearing age. And we sat down with the association, employees association, and they said, no, this is a problem. Let's find solutions. Can we do electrolysis? Can we do this? Can we trap mercury? Or can we tell the workers how to work so that they don't get exposure to mercury? And they came up with their own voluntary guidelines, a small handicrafts association, and asking their members to follow it. So it is something, it happened with the workers, with a dialogue, and the government said, okay, once you set up this voluntary guidelines, start using it, then we will be adopting it as a directive. We won't adopt it right now. We won't make it mandatory. We want you to use it. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, for example, in the plantation sector, we saw a lot of workers' hands getting, pressed, same examples, but from the coconut sector. And there, very smartly, some of these businesses worked with inspectors and industrial engineers to find solutions. is it worth, removing the sensor to make the operation 2 or 3 seconds faster? Or does it make sense to actually have something which will make, use ergonomics instead of removing the sensor? Can you do things ergonomically better, make sure that the supply is reaching on time? And then by making very small modifications which did not cost anything, they could save so many lives, so many people, their hands were saved because of working together with the labor inspectors and OSH inspectors, as well as with industrial engineers together. Now, all these things in Nepal, another area where we found that pesticide use was very high, and these were all very small tea growers. So you cannot have a safety committee in small growers. So we worked with the municipality to say that, because of pesticide use, cancer is happening. We need to work together. We need to have employers, workers, employers association, in that case, FNCCI and, others in Nepal. And we got together and got a safety committee at the municipality level. So the municipality and the mayor and the small businesses and the unions are now together working on increasing awareness on pesticide safety use, minimizing that. So there are a lot of opportunities that exist, but what happens is most of the time the companies get stuck in denial that everything is okay, or our auditor has said everything is okay, so we will assume everything is okay, or there's a checklist that we've given to the vendor and vendor has said yes, yes, yes. I mean, we have to go beyond that, because if something goes wrong in the supply chain, ultimately the big company has the biggest stake. So how we can actually work. And in another case, I will not name the country, but there was a case that was highlighted by an NGO child working in a plantation sector, and then it became a big news. But then the Employers Association, which was working with the ILO and the government and the trade unions, they said, look, yes, we know there is a problem, and that's why we have this action plan. It's an incremental action plan, and these are the things that we have done. So it actually it makes a business sense to have this action plan, and don't get stuck in denial mode, but actually plan in your company, plan it with your vendors and their vendors. And some of the things that we do in occupational health and safety, because I've worked a lot on this, are actually no cost or very little cost. They don't cost anything. It's just that we need to involve the workers and have a dialogue at the workplace, and many of these problems will actually be solved. And then we need a dialogue at the sector level. What Vineet ji was saying was more like a dialogue and stakeholder engagement that we try to do on responsible business conduct, so that these things can actually reach, and we shift from that denial mode. At the level of the government, what Dr. Sophie was saying, we are also looking at how do we build capacities on modern labor inspection techniques. There are modern labor inspection techniques, and many countries have started using this, where the labor inspectors and OSH inspectors are trained on, ultimate objective is that people should be safe, right? That is what, trade unions also don't want companies to shut down. They want their workers to be safe. Businesses want to keep running. We want to increase productivity and efficiency. So how do we look at inspectors also as experts on these areas, where they can actually connect you to other companies, other experts, give you examples from other companies that, look, other company has done this, can you also do this? But we're not using them. we are treating them as people who will come and it's all about पैसा कितना लगेगा, क्या होगा, clearance होगा कि नहीं. But instead, they are experts. We need to actually use them, and they can connect us to good industrial engineers. They can connect us to experts in the industry who can provide this kind of solutions. So I think that is also very important, to engage with the labor inspection and OSH inspection system. And many times these MSMEs are not formally registered, which means they are not also covered by the labor law, and the OSH inspectors, labor inspectors don't reach there. Now, some people might think it's good, but actually it is bad. It's bad for the big company. It's bad for the MSMEs also, because they don't have the money to hire an OSH expert. So these inspectors and and once they become members of the employers organizations facilitate that. So I think that connect with employers association, connections with unions can also help them reach more resources.
Thank you.
And last thing that I want to say is that when we look at ocean productivity, because this is something that is not being understood that clearly, but ILO is working in Vietnam where we are looking at productivity ecosystem for decent work, where we look at different ways to increase productivity, and many times in OSH, removing the sensors or increasing the pace of the machine by saving 3 seconds in a cycle is not the answer. The productivity answers lies somewhere else, not in that machine, but somewhere else. And then you have to look at the productivity ecosystem in totality, and improving OSH definitely increases the productivity. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's so passionately and so clearly put. And you made the business case. I'll have to pause you because Dr. Sophie had said she needed to go at 4:30. Sophie, if you have to go, please go anytime. But thank you so much. We'll circle back with you and appreciate it. We'll close this event in 15 minutes. But Sophie, before you go, if you want to say anything.
So I
Otherwise,
would largely say that we need to focus on, we need to maybe read OSH more carefully. And also there is a provision now, Section 8, which talk about suppliers' safety responsibilities. So it talks about importers, suppliers, designers, manufacturers, liabilities. So our engagement should be, since there is a new word being used, because the word is not explained in the definition part, but the new word is being used, maybe in the later amendments, we can suggest amendments more from the point of view of how the supplier's responsibilities and liabilities can be increased, and more in a more concrete manner can be written down in the law. So maybe we can work towards an amendment, putting more liabilities on the suppliers. Yeah.
Sure. No, thank you so much. Please stay
Thank you
only
so
as
much
much
for
as you
this
can, but
opportunity. I learned a lot, and I look
pleasure.
forward to become part of multiple opportunities like this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vinith, you want to say before we go on?
Taking a cue from what Professor Sophie said, so the future of sustainability reporting in auto, I think, will be less about the respective plant, because most of the auto activity today gets done through suppliers. So having said that, I think as we see the future, either through our recommendation or whatever way we can put it forward, so we'll have to see how safely and responsibly the companies operates not only these plants, but how effectively it influences the behaviors of hundreds of suppliers that collectively, shape its environment and the whole activity. Because as I said, it's no longer the plants. And this one can take from the global examples I shared, whether it's of Apple or whether it is of H&M or what we said of Nike. So unless auto industries really look at it, because it's soon going to come in their backyard. It's already their backyard. It's going to be part of their activity. So increasingly they'll have to, and it's just not a procurement order or a quality audit they have to do. They have to look at it, I think, more holistically. That's all.
Thank you. Please stay, because some questions are there for you. And if you don't mind, 15 minutes more. Sakshi, play that video of the brands just now, and I'll come back to the panel and Gaurav and Professor Nisha, who's also put a comment.
हमने आपकी गाड़ियों के पार्ट्स बनाने वाले 1200 श्रमिकों को इकट्ठा किया, मानेसर, पुणे, फरीदाबाद जैसे बड़े इंडस्ट्रियल हब में। हमने उन्हें एक सिंपल सा उनके नाम का स्टिकर दिया और कहा, इस स्टिकर को उस ब्रांड के नीचे लगाइए जिस ब्रांड का पार्ट बनाते हुए आपका एक्सीडेंट हुआ है।
होंडा का और मारुति का, दोनों का पार्ट।
तो किस मशीन पे काम करते थे?
ये पावर प्रेस।
तो आपको कैसे पता चलता है कि होंडा के पार्ट बन रहे हैं?
उसका साइन मारा जाता है और हमारा ये मारुति चला।
सारे आते हैं, मारुति के ऑडिटर भी आते हैं। कैसे पता माधव जी, महीना का बनता है, कैसे पता आपको?
सुपरवाइजर बोलता है।
बोलता है
होंडा साइन का बनता है।
होंडा साइन का कैसे पता आपको? होंडा बनता है,
मैं बनाती हूँ। लोग
मेरा पंजा खत्म हो गया।
कैसे?
डाई मशीन में आ गया।
किसका पार्ट बनाते हैं?
मारुति का।
आपको कैसे पता?
मारुति में सप्लाई करती है।
आपको कैसे पता?
मैं उससे काम करता हूँ 2.5-3 साल।
आपने देखा है?
हाँ,
मारुति।
हाँ।
क्या कमी थी मशीन में?
मशीन में सेंसर नहीं था,
सेंसर नहीं था।
बाईपास था।
उसमें हीरो में जाता है सप्लाई, टेंशनर की जो पार्ट लगता है वो हीरो की गाड़ी में लगता है।
हीरो का बनता है।
हीरो के, होंडा के, महिंद्रा, मारुति।
कितनी उम्र है आपकी?
21
21। किस कंपनी के लिए पार्ट बना रहे थे आप?
आप हीरो में जाता है वो पार्ट बन के।
हीरो में जाता है।
तो अचानक से मशीन हाथ पे ही गिर गया। वहाँ पे मारुति की ब्रेक बनती हैं, कई पार्ट ऐसे ऐसे बनते हैं उस कंपनी में। हमारी लाइफ अच्छी चल रही थी, अब लाइफ वैसी नहीं रही, अब हाथ ही नहीं रहे, तो अब कहाँ से चलेगी सही लाइफ।
बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियों के लिए काम करते हुए श्रमिक रोजाना चोटिल हो रहे हैं। गाड़ियों के पार्ट्स बनाते हुए अपने शरीर के पार्ट्स खो रहे हैं। क्या ऐसा हो सकता है कि हम कभी श्रमिकों को बुलाएं और ये बोर्ड्स खाली ही रहें?
Thank you, Sakshi. So, you saw what happened and what workers said to us. The brands who are here, I think they ask us often, how do we know? So workers are saying themselves that this is how they know, and this is the numbers they have. I want Gaurav for 2 minutes on screen if it's possible. Gaurav, are you there? Gaurav, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, good. Let's see if we can put your video online. Sakshi will try, I'm sure. Oh, there you are, Gaurav. Excellent. Gaurav Jain is our lawyer to represent us at Haryana Human Rights Commission. What happened in 2019 was that based on our first Crush 2019, there were newspaper articles, and HHRC, Haryana Human Rights Commission, picked that up and filed a suo motu against Maruti, Honda, and Hero. That case has been going on. We were talking about it ourselves. At some stage, the commission told us to do a legal response, right? So Gaurav came into our rescue and he worked really hard to present this very strong argument that it's a legal responsibility of brands towards their workers in the supply chain. Gaurav, what are the top few arguments that you presented to HHRC about brands' legal responsibility towards workers in supply chain? Because often we hear, brands are responsible for their own workers, legally speaking, and for nothing below that. So please.
So one of the, in fact, the most repeated argument of all the brands was that these suppliers are independent legal entities and we have no control over them. Therefore, if any accident is happening in their factories, you cannot hold us responsible. So the whole response, which ran into like 70 plus pages, centered around this, in demolishing this argument. And we did it by using some of the Supreme Court judgments, international judgments, and some pre-existing treaties. And for example, there's a Supreme Court judgment, Hussain Bhai case, where this argument has been dealt with, that if there is an intermediary, a series of intermediaries, but one can clearly see that the person for whom the actual manufacturing is happening is only trying to hide that clear connection by bringing in more layers, then that layer, that veil, can be pierced by the courts, and that principal employer can be held responsible. There were other Madras High Court judgments. There was also a Shamsher Kataria judgment, which was, interestingly, it was a competition commission judgment. But during our research, we came to know that that judgment came greatly in our rescue in establishing that if the component manufacturers, the OEMs and their suppliers, if they are taking all the inputs, technical know-how from the OEMs itself, and they are virtually working under their direct control. So in a way, this whole series where tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers are created between the end worker and the OEM who is actually manufacturing their product, then all those intermediary contracts can be treated as a series where either the OEM is acting as a principal employer or at best a joint employer with the intermediaries. And therefore, if an accident happens with a worker in a supplier, maybe tier 2, maybe tier 3 or tier 4, then it can be connected back to the OEMs. For that, we also used various principles such as the non-delegable duty, because if the Article 21, Article 19 and Article 14 fundamental rights are being violated of the workers, then it doesn't matter. And that worker is clearly manufacturing, let's say, Maruti's or Honda's or Hero's product, which even this very beautiful experiment which Safe in India has done, where they just allowed the workers to put this that parchi on that board. So clearly they know whose product they are manufacturing, and they lost their hand while manufacturing that product. So in that situation, they cannot just wash away their hand, and they have a non-delegable duty which they cannot delegate to an intermediary. So if a worker loses his hand while manufacturing such a product, the OEM, the Maruti or Honda or Hero, has a legal responsibility. I understand that it's already 4:43 and we have overshot our thing. So I would not go to a greater length, but by and large, we try to demolish this central argument कि हमारा कोई जिम्मेदारी नहीं है. And we also made it very clear that while we are putting the central responsibility on the OEMs to take care of the workers, but we are also not absolving the government. And lastly, we also said that OEMs can go to extreme length, and they actually go to extreme length in ensuring that the product quality is of the top-notch quality, and they can do whatever it takes to do that. If they can do that for the product quality, they can certainly do for worker safety. With that, I would conclude.
Gaurav, thank you. Very crisp. You're right. We're running short of time. We'll try closing it in 5 minutes. Bharti, there's a question which is connected to this for you amongst the audience. And Sakshi, we can put Professor Nisha Srivastava on screen, please do. But see what you can do. Her question was related to this, that is there, do you think that brands should be taking on grievance from the supply chain of the workers? And is there some global good practice or any example? Nisha ji, you are here. Why don't you just explain your question? And any comments?
Hi, first of all, congratulations for the report and for this video conference. I'd like to ask Bharti, since you have a lot of international experience, one thing that came across in many of my interviews with the workers was simply this, that, they all know that the machine is bad, it is malfunctioning, and they complain about it, but, nothing happens. So what I'm trying to ask is really, are there grievance mechanisms in other countries that you have mentioned where workers can voice their protest or whatever their grievance is without forming unions? Because forming unions is becoming harder and harder by the day. So are there grievance mechanisms in some of these other countries which you have seen?
Sure, Nishaji. I think one of the things is that under the OSH convention of the ILO, the first thing is that there is a right of the worker to stop work if the worker feels that the machine is malfunctioning or the machine can harm. So there is a right to stop work which is available with workers, of course, because of the vulnerability of the workers and the power relations. Many times the workers' voices are not heard, but as per the act and as per, it is something very fundamental. It is right to life, of the worker. So that exists. But the question is, can we really use it? Is the worker allowed to use it?
Practically, it's not there. Practically, it's not there. I mean,
practically, it's not there. Yeah. I mean, theoretically, it's there in the ILO conventions, and it is mostly there in all OSH codes, the right to stop work. But the second thing is that also sometimes we've seen that the labor inspectors also don't understand right to stop, and supervisors also don't understand right to stop work. You know, they sometimes feel that the entire factory needs to stop. No, it is only that particular machine that needs to stop. And many times we've also told labor inspectors, don't ask the entire unit to shut because one machine is not working. It's only one machine that needs to be shut, and the worker can work on the other line. So that's something where we found that a lot of people do not have understanding of what right to stop work basically means. The other thing is grievance mechanism. Yes, ideally there should be an OSH committee at the workplace, which is kind of mandatory also in all OSH legislations. And this OSH committee consists of half workers, half management, and there should be a that should be the first entry point for the grievance. The worker should be able to tell to this OSH committee members that, look, I think the machine is not okay and I won't work on it. And the OSH, it is the duty of the OSH committee members then to see whether the machine is okay or not. So that's the first channel within an enterprise. But unfortunately, you know, many enterprises don't have OSH committees, or even if there are OSH committees, the worker representation may not be there. I think that's again an implementation level problem. The second is, of course, the workers can actually go out. They can also go out to outside unions for support, even if there is no union inside. And they can also go to the Labor Department, as well as they can go to the State Human Rights Commission. But all these processes are very long. You know, it's very easy to say that these grievances, I mean, these grievance entry points are there, but practically for a worker to approach that, and that too as a single worker, is very difficult. And that's why at our level, we always promote workplace committees, OSH committees, with representation of not just the regular workers, but also of the contract workers, part-time workers, so that their voices are also heard. So these, I mean, and in cases where in Sri Lanka and Nepal, we also tried looking at having these committees outside. You know, when the enterprises are very small, they may not be able to have an OSH committee. So how at a cluster level or a municipality level or a ward level, these committees can be formed. In case of Bricklins, for example, we work with employers, Bricklin Employers Association, and governments in Telangana and Orissa to set it up at the, we divided the work Bricklins into zones, and each zone had a grievance committee. So those kind of experiments we have done, which have been very successful, because it allows the workers to have a voice, and then some solutions can be found before it becomes a bigger problem for workers in terms of losing their life, but also in terms of businesses, it becoming into an industrial, some kind of a dispute that happens and becomes big.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one more thing which everyone knows, and then, because from the ILO, we also have the ILO supervisory mechanism. So which means that unions and workers' organizations can represent, complaints of the workers at the highest level, at the ILO level, where they can file representations, and they can also raise complaints if the state is not taking an action. So those channels are also there, but then they are at a higher level. And sometimes, like the Qatar football stadium, where a lot of workers were losing their lives from India and Nepal, these kind of matters were raised at the ILO supervisory mechanism level as well. So that mechanism is also available, but usually it's for a group of worker or a particular sector where there's a lot of challenges happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bharti, and thank you, Nisha ji. I think we have gone beyond time, but 90% of the people have stayed back all this while. So I think I should just thank and close now, right? Thank you so much, Vineet. Thank you, Bharti.
Thank you.
Nisha is here. Thank you for all the audience to spend more than 2 hours with us listening to this. There were a number of auto sector executives here. Thank you, and others. I hope you got some
Sandeep,
useful
just
messages.
1 second. Sandeep, can I just ask one thing? What happened to the case, the human rights case that
We are waiting for the final judgment. So
Okay.
it's late. But it's now, the court has to issue order and we are following up with them.
Okay,
So no,
thanks.
that's good. It's an important question. Is there any, the report link is, by the way, on the chat. It's also on our website. I also want to thank our teams who have put the report together and today together. So Saroja, Siddharth, Dhanraj, Sakshi, you have done most of this work. So thank you so much. And Rahul, of course. So thank you, and see you in 6 months' time when we will launch the next report called Safety Niti. That's our second series, as many of you know. This Crushed is about bottom-up evidence of worker accidents in the supply chain of top 10 brands. Safety Niti is about the OSH policies of the brands for them in their own factories for contract workers and for their supply chain. And we compare the brands on that. The good news is a number of brands have improved their policies since we started the report in 2023. So thanks to that. Implementation, we heard about that today. So thank you once again. Thank you for staying back. And thank you to the workers who are there with us today. And see you soon. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
अरे बंद कैसे करते हैं भाई?